to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me tonight, the compound V to my preparation H, it's Jamie.
Hey.
See, I wanted to highlight my age and my ass problems. No, I'm just kidding. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
I am doing okay. We have been sorting through some audio/Skype issues this evening. So once again, a podcast that was meant to start, in the early evening. We're going to get this thing done. I was going to actually get it out to you guys at night. You could listen to it as you fall asleep. Of course, one thing leads to the other, and we were recording 2+ hours later. So, but beyond that, just like everybody else out there, I think this is the year when anyone asks you how you're doing, unless you have a very specific horror story. We're all just saying things like hanging in there or surviving and stuff like that. So that's
or just I'm cool, sitting here eating my almond joy.
Look at you already making a reference to the topic that I haven't even brought up yet, which I better do that right now. So yeah, we are here tonight to finally do some neato podcast coverage of the Amazon Prime series, The Boys. Now, as some of our listeners will recall, because I know some of them didn't listen to it because they didn't, watch the series, about five or 6 weeks ago, I teamed up with Brian to cover the show that I've really been giving the hard sell, like I'm hoping to get the Glenn Ross leads or something. The DC Universe and now HBO Max's Doom Patrol. That was the one where, I gave you guys a little history about the show and about the comics and whatever. And then we covered both last year's season 1 and then the just completed season 2. Then just a few weeks ago, I paired up with Kimber, who was last seen on our podcast in the long lamented Crown podcast we did back in March of 2018. We got together to do Netflix's Umbrella Academy, that similar mega podcast treatment. Once again, ran down a little bit of the history of the Hargreaves family. Then we ripped through last year's season 1 before diving into the piping fresh at the time season 2. So 3 times the charm is the way we look at it. Because tonight, Jamie, you are joining me for a full press coverage of Amazon Prime's The Boys. So guess what, kids? You can probably guess how this podcast is going to go down. You're going to get a little bit of history. Then we're going to rewind the clock back about a year to talk about season 1. And then we will hit the ground running to break down the recently released season 2. Or should I say, the first 4 episodes of season 2. Because unbeknownst to most of us, and if this was reported ahead of time, I know I didn't get that memo. Unlike the first season, Amazon Prime decided to release 3 episodes at once and then release the remaining 5 on a weekly basis. I mean, I believe I understand why they did that. I think it's about stretching out content because things may start drying up a little bit for both streamers and networks aside, all because of COVID-19 this year. That's obviously impacted things greatly. A series like The Boys, and actually several others, are at least they're shot in Canada. So my understanding, and some of this is built on assumption, even shows that had to halt production, I think are back up and running. Once they had all the people involved, the cast and crew members, maybe they probably had to go through some sort of quarantine situation because Canada, I think, has been very vigilant about that. But once they passed that, they could complete the production of whatever the series is. I think that's what happened with Fargo, because it turned out all of Fargo season 4 was actually being shot in Canada, which I wasn't aware of until I looked it up, in the last week or so. And that's probably why they were finally able to get running with their season again. So that's pretty much the plan. So sound good?
Sounds good to me.
And also, just to preface things, and also to give the folks the chance to hear your voice a little bit more before they start hearing me go on and on. Unlike the 2 previous co-hosts, well, you definitely have a certain level of comic book knowledge. I mean, you may not be a fully certified comic book geek like those, like they could be at times, but you're familiar with. You've read some comics, from what I understand. So it's not a totally
Yeah.
lost medium to you. In fact, we've actually referenced stuff that even I haven't fucking read or didn't want to read. So, and there will be things you'll definitely, maybe you may not be aware of, but you'll probably find interesting when I go off on this little tangent here, which will reference certain comics and even TV shows that you're familiar with. So hopefully you will be as entertained as everybody else listening.
I'm all for it.
Okay. And feel free to cut in or react or tell me to get on with it or whatever. So, for the folks out there, The Boys. It was originally a comic book series, of course. It ran from roughly 2006 to 2012, and it was written by Garth Ennis, who probably is best known for creating Preacher. Now, some of you might be familiar with the AMC series based on that work, if not the comic books. Over his career, he also did a lot of major, memorable work with characters ranging from John Constantine. A lot of you TV viewers might be familiar with him from his own TV show, as well as Legends of Tomorrow. The Punisher, which never one of my favorite characters, but I know he's an anti-hero that's popular with people who are Marvel Comics fans, or even the Netflix series, which I still have never watched. He actually worked on Judge Dredd, which is amazing, as Judge Dredd's just a great comic book character. And there's another one of his own creations with Hitman, which I think a few people out there might be familiar with. I think they did a movie. Is it Timothy the Elephant movie based on that, or is it based on a video game? I'm never sure. Don't know. The one thing you might notice about all these aforementioned characters, outside of the occasional, maybe a little bit of mystical ability or a sense of uncanny aim, Ennis was never really much of a superhero guy. The fact is, Garth Ennis generally had a lot of, let's say, disdain for the typical superpowered guys and gals in tights genre, which is what clearly and eventually led to his creation of The Boys, which he did at the time for Wildstorm, which was actually a DC Comics imprint. Think of that kind of like the way a movie studio has a smaller subsidiary that they use to release other sorts of films, like Warner Brothers does with New Line Cinema for like horror and low budget films, or 20th Century Fox uses Fox Searchlight for like independent and artistic films. Anyway, collaborating with the artist and designer Derek Robertson, DC/Wildstorm published The Boys back in the fall of 2006. Except here's the thing. After about 6 issues, DC realized that even though this is being done through an imprint, it still might have been just a little bit too anti-superhero for their tastes. However, to their credit, and they should get credit for at least this, instead of just outright canceling the series, they did work out a deal with Ennis and Robertson, which allowed them to retain the rights to The Boys, and they could shop it around to another publisher. Therefore, they could continue to work on the book, and regardless of any kind of contractual commitment they might have had to DC Comics. Turns out a smaller publisher called Dynamite Entertainment, which at the time was known best for publishing mainly movie franchise related titles. So they would do comics based on The Terminator and RoboCop and like The Evil Dead and things like that. They agreed to pick up the ball that DC had willingly dropped. And over the next 6 years, you ended up with another 66 issues of what was probably the most joyfully violent comic books to be found on any rack, anywhere. Now, as I said, Ennis was never much of a fan of the actual superhero genre, and the comic is rather merciless, as it not only subversively mocks comic book iconography, like, obviously right off the top, the Justice League of America. There's no coincidence that the team is the Seven, and the original Justice League lineup was 7 heroes. And you can actually draw an obvious parallel between all of the characters. I mean, I know everyone watching, you've already picked up that Homelander is a takeoff on Superman, or Queen Maeve is a takeoff on Wonder Woman. The Deep is Aquaman. A-Train is supposed to be the Flash. Black Noir is supposed to be Batman. The departed Lamplighter that we have not gotten to see on the series, well, just by the name Lamplighter, that must be Green Lantern. And then you have Translucent. He actually is kind of as close as they got to a parallel to the Martian Manhunter, because one of Martian Manhunter, who, by the way, if anyone ever asks you what superhero powers would you want, and people go, oh, should it be Flash? Should it be Superman? Kids, pick the Martian Manhunter. He can pretty much do everything Superman can do, plus turn invisible, plus shapeshift, plus phase. He's like, the only thing that sucks is that, he kind of has a issue with fire. But anyway, he could turn invisible. So there's the translucent connection, I guess. Back to the comic and the storylines. The commentary really covered everything from the corruption of American ideals, war profiteering, capitalism, and just plain and simple crass commercialization. Now, it really is, at that point, you realize it's no surprise that Garth Ennis was part of that British wave that I had mentioned. I think I mentioned it during the Umbrella Academy podcast. There was this huge British wave of creators who came here. Like Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, and Garth Ennis and several others. So it was interesting because you look at those guys like Grant Morrison, he embraced the genre and he really looked to expand the possibilities of it. Alan Moore, he subverted the genre and took it to places that had not been seen before. Garth Ennis was actually more of an anarchist than the other two. So he just took glee in burning it all down. So over the last several years, it's been a property that really has attracted the attention of Hollywood. There have been multiple plans for different productions to make their way to the silver screen. But honestly, nothing has ever came, I should say, of those projects, which they really barely ever made it through the initial rewriting stage, which is where we finally get to the Amazon Prime TV series. See, we finally hooked around to it. The folks behind the Preacher series, namely like Seth Rogen, we all know who Seth Rogen is, Evan Goldberg and Eric Kripke probably played the biggest part in getting this from concept to getting it before the cameras. However, only one of them is actually considered the creator of the TV series. That would be Eric Kripke. Some listeners might know him as the man that's behind the series with 1 million episodes, Supernatural. Actually, if you look into the histories of any number of the writers and people behind the scenes of this series, a lot of them come from Supernatural and stuff like that. So it feels like I'm sure they're all thrilled that they can just finally not have to deal with networks. Like, oh, we can curse and blood spurt everywhere. We can do whatever we want now. And speaking of Supernatural, that connection will take on yet another dimension in the 3rd season of The Boys. Spoiler for the 3rd season, because it was reported a number of weeks ago that one of the stars of Supernatural, Jensen Ackles, has actually signed on to play the character Soldier Boy. And by the way, you might guess it just from the code name. That's pretty much a twisted parody of Captain America.
Big stretch.
So that's the history lesson behind the original source material. When we get to the point when we've completed talking about, wow, so well put. Once we've finished up talking about season 1, I probably will talk about the differences between the comic book series and the TV series, because there are a lot of really kind of interesting things there before we jump into season 2. But now, because people A, came here to listen to us talk about the TV show, and B, people might want to hear Jamie's voice as well at some point, let's get to season 1. And the series kicks off with a bang, or a bloody burst, really, with the name of the game. And what's really excellent about the pilot or premiere episode is they do an excellent job of really giving us the setup of the entire series. It's not just about character introductions and plot introductions. It's really just creating a world for us here. A world of superheroes that are revered around the world, and particularly in America. And as we soon discover, or almost immediately discover, these heroes that we meet are far from heroic. Corrupted dark souls more often than not, more concerned about PR and points on their next movie deal, or maybe action figure consignment or something, than actually helping people. And what really makes this why I'm especially impressed with their first episode is the way they bring it home here. It's an events that bookend the episode. From the opening, which of course is the whole scene that happens with A-Train literally running through the girlfriend of our main character, Huey.
Yeah.
Which, oh, by the way, clearly A-Train is not as fast as the Flash, because the Flash could just phase through poor Robin, but instead, A-Train blows her up and clearly doesn't give a damn about it. And then the final scene where we see, our stand-in for Superman, Homelander, using his heat vision to destroy a jet carrying the mayor of Baltimore, who himself may not be such an innocent guy, but his kid and pretty much everybody else in that plane surely was. So we can Jamie, if you want to dive in a little bit on just your take or your memories of that very first episode, because I know when I saw it for the first time, and I had not read the comic book series at the time either, I was just like, my jaw was just on the floor in the first 5 minutes. So, it had that kind of impact
Oh,
on me.
absolutely. The second we see Huey's girlfriend get hit by a train and just explode, like literally explode all over him, I was like, yep, I'm in. This is going to be a great show. We just don't see that. We don't, we've never got to see. We've all talked about it. We've seen hero movies of all kinds. We've read hero books. You see the collateral damage and the destruction, and we all make comments on it jokingly, like, who's going to take care of that? I love that in this series. We get to see how that actually would play out in a real life situation.
Right. It's reminiscent of the way, for example, the way some people, one of the complaints people had about the movie Man of Steel was, the third act destruction of Metropolis, and talking about
Right.
how, countless hundreds or thousands of people, might have lost their lives while all this is going on, and no one's really paying attention to that. I have my issues with that take on it, but that was a topic for an older podcast. But they really, they take that ball and go running with it on this series. I mean, and again, from the word go, or with what A-Train does through Robin. I even love the fact her name is Robin, even though I've gone out with way too many people named Robin. But, TMI. So.
Hey, Robin.
Well, the one thing they all probably have in one of a couple things they all have in common is that I'm pretty sure none of them listen to this podcast. Another great thing about the boys that's established in this first episode, and I think this is really key for the enjoyment of any number of series. We're given like a few major tent poles that we're going to be, to take that metaphor horrifically further, we're going to be sliding down for the rest of the season for both plot and major characters. Even at the same time, while enjoying a number of side stories and how entertaining all the colorful supporting players are, whether it be other members of the Seven, or it be other members of the boys, or the people that they encounter. Like I said, I was very impressed with how they did that. Because I feel like we're set up with at least 3, and, maybe one should make the case for 4 really central figures, which is already pretty impressive because, most shows you watch, I usually say this too. This show, I think, has 4. First you have Huey Campbell. Writer hat on, I'm tagging him as the main character. I think,
Yes.
Huey Campbell is presented. We always like to talk about certain shows, and we find that character who's a stand-in for the audience.
Exactly.
And in some series, they're sort of kind of, at least for a chunk of them, feel like the main character, even if maybe the series might drift away from that. I'll use an example like the show Oz. I don't know. Did you ever see Oz?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you watch the first season of Oz, the feeling when you're watching it initially is Tobias Beecher is your main character. It kind of, obviously it becomes more of an ensemble piece, and they kind of drift away from that, in successive seasons. But I feel like at the end of the day, among the convicts, Beecher is still the main character. And a lot of it was, he was standing in for us because it was like, we were supposed to feel this is what it's like to go into prison, and
Right.
we're suffering through him. And it's nice when it's interesting. I think it's always more interesting when it's the main character who's a stand-in for us as opposed to a side character. So like Lost, for example, I think most people say Hurley is our stand-in because he's the one making the comments that we would make. He's the one wondering
Right.
about things, and which works great for the show, but it's still, it's side commentary from someone who's not one of the central characters on the show. On this show, Huey definitely feels like the central character. Maybe if there was one of the weaknesses of the show, and it's very slight, so I wouldn't really critique it heavily about that. Huey does tend to be more of a reactionary character than someone who drives the action, but that's forgivable considering the people who are around him, and especially when you get someone like Billy Butcher around you.
Right, absolutely. Everybody that he's surrounded by is like 10 paces higher than what he based his reality on.
Right. And but what's great about that character, like I said, we're being introduced to an entirely different world here. I mean, it looks like ours. And actually, in some ways, it really looks like ours after the last year or so. But it's all the secrets that are coming out and things that are being revealed, and a lot of them are being revealed to Huey. So he's us. So it really works nicely in that fashion. After Huey, I think then you have Starlight or Annie, or I like their names, Annie January. People, do they rarely ever mention what her last name is? Because I just love her last name is January.
I did not know her last name was January.
See, there you go. She's actually, as I said from the top, or maybe I didn't actually. She's the latest recruit for the Seven, and possibly, at least when you're watching season 1, possibly the only non-corrupted superpowered being that we meet. At least, like I said, at least initially. Speaking of corruption or not, then you have the Billy Butcher character, who's also clearly a major character. It's interesting that he kind of feels like more. I always thought Billy Butcher felt more like a supporting character, and then he kind of shifts into a more central role after the first few episodes, because it's Huey reacting to him because
yes.
Whatever. But he's the man who's dead set on bringing down the Supes, and he's a major part of one of the major storylines of season 1 is learning just why he is a vengeance-seeking vigilante. And I guess I really would have to say maybe Homelander would probably qualify as the other major tentpole for the season and series overall. I think because his story in season 1 really incorporates so much about the Vought Corporation, the story behind
right.
Compound V, his own origins, and how it all ties back together to Billy Butcher. So, yeah, I would say outside of what we've already mentioned, the opening with, his girlfriend exploding and then, and the thing was, what I loved about the episode and why I mentioned the book ending of it, if you had just seen what happened with A-Train running through Robin, and that was it, so to speak, then we could almost chalk it up to, it's just this guy. Maybe he was on something at the time. We don't know the story of what's going on with A-Train at this point in the series, but this might be all about just this single incident. Kind of like, the beginning of The Shield, where, a corrupt cop kills another undercover cop, and that one incident has ramifications for the rest of the series, and you figure, it's really all going to be about that. And it isn't until we get to the end of this episode where we realize, oh no, they're all bad, and Homelander is really bad. So,
right, the leader of the bad.
Right. But I'm gonna say, and this will be our get a little combo going on here. Outside of the character intros and the way the episode is bookended, I think the thing that really stuck with me the most about the first episode is the stuff that happens between the Deep and Starlight. That whole situation. I think that, to me, that was had not read the comics beforehand. I was not aware of there being any kind of situation like this. And I will talk about that after we finish season 1, because it's quite different in the comics. But this was, that was the part that kind of made me, it kind of creeped me out, but in a, I hate to say in a good way, but you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, it just, again, it just encompasses the power struggle. You've got somebody who, air quotes, retired out of the Seven, so we need to find a replacement. And here's this young girl who has basically spent her entire life training to be that replacement, and trying out to be that replacement. And if you look at so many different industries that obviously aren't superheroes, anti-superheroes, but I mean something as like, huge franchise cheerleading groups, the pageant industry, how, even executive positions, how many times has a woman stepped in to try out for that job, and maybe even males in certain aspects too, where it's, hey, you scratch my back and that's how you're going to get in good with the boys.
Right. And it's funny that this series is actually called The Boys, but in this
The
case,
boys,
we're
right?
referring to the seven.
Opposite.
I feel like it's for, at least for me, it's almost. I'm actually going to skip part of what I was going to do later on because I think it really needs to be talked about here, because it's relevant to the conversation and what we're talking about. The way that they handle the situation between the Deep and Starlight in this episode, and obviously it plays out in subsequent episodes when she finally reveals everything on stage at the Believe fair or whatever you call that event. So I am actually going to cut in something. As I said, I was going to talk about the difference between the comic and the TV show. But this is something I actually did a bit more digging on beyond the comic, so maybe it should be talked about here. Obviously in the TV series, Annie's, I'll just out and out call it a sexual assault, because if she's coerced into doing this, it's a sexual assault. In the series, it's just a one-on-one encounter between her and the Deep. And we, as mentioned, we do later see there are consequences for the wannabe Aquaman here, and pretty much in how he spirals from that. Not that we should have sympathy for him, but just saying, there is some sort of, level of, I don't know if punishment is the right way to put it, but, or comeuppance. I kind of just love that word so much. Here's the thing. In the actual comic book, and so we're going back to 2006 now, it's not the Deep who does that. It's actually several other members of the Seven. Yeah, I said several. 3. Homelander, A-Train, and Black Noir, who all demand the same sort of oral treatment, shall we say, from Starlight. And what's probably even worse... Well, not probably. What's worse? There really is no direct. I'll use that word again. Comeuppance for their rapey actions. I mean, stuff does happen to them in one way or another, but it's not as a direct result of that.
Right.
So, when I did first, and then I've known that for a while. What I didn't know is when I did some more research, turned out when they were first creating season 1 and writing the very first episode, the showrunner creator, Eric Kripke, he was actually planning to avoid the whole Starlight rape issue altogether. He wasn't going to use it at all. But the female writers and producers on the series, they objected. They said that, some form of it, some version of it has to be used on the show. And that is what eventually led to the storyline involving the Deep. Also, and because this wasn't the case back in 2006, and plus it was a comic book, so maybe it wouldn't have mattered. I don't know how much of an asshole Ennis really is. The storyline became very much shaped by what was going on in the real world over the last few years.
Yes.
So the various high-profile sexual harassment and rape scandals, the Me Too movement specifically, really helped shape where they were going to go with this. And everything from not just what happens in that first episode, but her previously coming out with what happened a few episodes later and everything. That was stuff they came up with for the series, but it was pretty much what was going on in real life was really pushing their envelope as well. And I think actually let's face it, from what I know from the comics and then what they did in the series, in all ways and forms, I think they made the right decision. I think that was
I agree. It's a post Weinstein world, and her situation is something that is it is very relatable, and we needed something that would show her humanity that was separate from the group, and how she doesn't actually belong with these people.
Right, absolutely, and it's. In a way, if Huey is our doorway into just the world overall, in some ways, or in most ways, I guess, Starlight is our doorway into the world of Vought Industries and the Seven, because much like Huey's naivete, same goes for her. She's learning things that she never imagined or knew before, just the way he is. Which is probably, so they're kind of like peas of a pod, or whatever, however that stupid phrase goes. So, it's like I said, it's a really well done pilot. I was just talking to a friend the other day who had not watched the series yet. Her husband has, and he was willing, he'd seen season one at least. He was willing to rewatch it just so she could watch it, but she's not big on superhero stuff, although she has seen the occasional thing. And I was telling her, I think you'll like it anyway. And I said, the one really good thing about The Boys, there are some shows that when you tell someone to check them out, you tell them they need to be a little patient. You need to give it a few episodes. If you're not hooked by like the third or the fourth or whatever episode it is for whatever series we're talking about, then maybe you should give up. The Boys is one I would say, if you don't like the first episode, that's pretty much the blueprint for the show. You should be one and done. Just give it up. Because
it really is.
Yeah.
They involve you in that world within seconds of entering, and like you said, you got your standard character setup, but they really paint the entire universe in that pilot, which is really impressive because there's a lot of universe there.
Oh yeah, there's so much going on, and it's also it's wall to wall references and Easter eggs, most of which I'm not even going to talk about, but to be able to do so much with plot and character and story and still have any number of winks and nods to things. I mean, a few things will be mentioned just because you can't help it. I mean, let's face it, Vought in many ways is pretty much a commentary on Disney.
Right.
And
yes.
And all the movie stuff, one can look at it, at certain points, especially in season one, it feels like they're really riffing on the, what's called the MCU, so to speak. And then you realize when you get to season two or whatever, it's like, oh, you know what? Now they're making fun of the DC, Dawn of Justice, Dawn of the Seven, even the same kind of font is being used. Oh, it's hysterical. So, as we move through the series, like the second episode, because I think obviously we don't want to spend time, a ton of time on every episode, because then that's why we end up a 2 hour and 40-minute podcast as of late.
Exactly.
But I feel like each episode has a little something in it that just to target at least a character. Because like when we get to the second episode, obviously that's the episode that people probably remember most for. Oh, that's the one where Translucent explodes, which is, yeah. So we know, and you start wondering, hey, is that going to be a thing on the show? Are they just going to blow somebody up in every episode? Because it's starting to feel that way. But I'm going to say the key thing of note in the second episode is meeting the Frenchie character.
I really like him.
I love the fact that, and he's one of these characters who I think, the more we get to see him, and we piece little things together, because we're never told his entire backstory, which I love that. I love that we can kind of piece together little things about him, and we might have one perspective or view of him, which certainly changes over the course of the series. Obviously, a lot of it changes due to the fact of the addition of another character who shows up in, I think, the fourth episode, Kamiko. But I just love, how do I put this? Each of the boys, because we'll meet another one in the next episode, they are so fully individualized and unique from each other, and yet they're a nice little kind of blend together. It just reminds me of all the really great little ragtag teams throughout the history of fiction. Whether it be books or movies or TV shows, whatever. They all have that kind of like, Magnificent Seven, Dirty Dozen kind of, Ocean's 11 kind of feel to them. And even though we only deal with a limited number of Frenchie, he will steal the scene quite often, which is something on a show like this. But I really love that character a lot. The next character, but the one who I really sometimes might be my favorite character we meet in the third episode, which is called Get Some. When we meet Mother's Milk, I love that guy.
I do too.
There's something about him. Obviously he may not be an older dude at all, but he just has instant gravitas with me. It's amazing. He's just, I don't know if he's just a cool motherfucker or whatever, but I really love that character.
It's probably a little bit of that, but he also, again, how we have, we have Huey as the main character, and as speaking for the audience, um, he also kind of has this too, because he's got that "you've got to be fucking kidding me." He can put his foot down and kind of demand some sort of rationale of what he's looking and what's happening. He's the boss. He comes across like a leader.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those situations where there were certainly times throughout season one wonders, why is Butcher the guy in charge? Because Mother's Milk
Right.
feels like the one who should be in charge more often than not.
Exactly.
And I think he also fulfills that trope of there's always got to be the reluctant hero, the guy who doesn't really want to be there, who's just doing it just because, but he just wants to get back to his family. Maybe he's fulfilling some long ago obligation or responsibility or promise or something, but he doesn't really want to be there, even though he's like the most stand up guy there.
Exactly. And his right from the get-go, you kind of see his inherent desire to keep some sense of control, and they of course they come back to that again in the second season, and
Yeah.
what that actually really does to a person, the need to have that control. But I think it's great. It's a great character writing, like carryover again, like Frenchie. It's nice to see that these characters they really developed layers for them.
Yeah, absolutely. The other, I would say because like I said, just kind of like as I just skip through the season, I'm just like mentioning like the little bullet point notable things about each episode. I got to say the other notable thing in the third episode is, Pop Claw killing her landlord with crazy sex. The thing putting aside the silliness of killing someone, I guess she was sitting on his face and crushes it. If I recall, she's riding the mustache, so to speak.
And that this entire thing was under surveillance makes it even better.
And they're watching like but it also opens up something about the show. I'm trying to remember if I'm right about this. I'm going to assume I am, but obviously I'm clearly not going off of notes for this one. Pop Claw is one of the people when we start discovering, okay, so there's any number of other heroes out there who all have like whatever unique or odd, whatever abilities. And, it's not just the seven and a couple others. You start becoming aware of the fact, there's a lot out there. Cause then the girl's going to eventually, see there's like the guy who wants to race A-Train, Shockwave, who we see again, recur again in season 2, whatever. And then we start to hear about there's any number of them. I'm going to spoil another difference between the comic book once again, but I'm going to keep this one to like a 20-second thing. Whereas in this series, it's just like a big takeoff on the Justice League. And then you have all these other random heroes. In the comics, they riff on all the super teams, in one form or another. And they all are in that universe. So they're, like Pop Claw is a member of a team, which I'm pretty sure is a takeoff on the Teen Titans. They're like called Teenage Kicks. I'm going to say that's what it's a takeoff. There's another team called Payback. I'm like going, I suspect that's a Suicide Squad. Could be wrong, but I don't think I am. So but as far as the series is concerned, it's like, I just love the idea of, here, there's B-list superheroes, there's C-list superheroes, because any comic book reader knows, that applies to comic books too. There's always like the lame or the more lame ones or the more fringe ones of people, the ones who can never carry a title on their own kind of characters. Pop Claw would be one of those characters.
Well, and she's kind of she had a little bit of fame, and she's sort of a has-been. Is that how she's written in?
Yeah, I feel like she, I guess I don't know if I would use has-been, but yeah, I'll go. She's obviously if she's someone who's having issues paying her rent, she's obviously not living on the fruits of her success, even though it is a nice apartment. So there's that. But yeah, I would say that, and I mean a lot of, and to go with what you're saying, because the thing about the series that superheroes are celebrities. They are the celebrity of the day. So it's very much akin to that. It's like someone who might have been, say, like, a child star and is kind of living on harder times now. if like Lindsay Lohan without the money or something like that. I don't know. So yeah, I think that's a correct assertion there.
All right.
The fourth episode is the one that got me when I watched this series. And again, they got me from the first episode, but that's the one that has the event that is the one I probably referenced the most when I was trying to tell people to watch the show a year ago, which means I was spoiling something for them, but I don't care. That's the episode with Flight 37.
Yes.
That was what got me. That made me go, wow. Even though you think blowing up a girlfriend and all the other things that happened in the first, or killing your landlord with your vagina would have been enough, but it's Flight 37.
When is that enough?
Well, this year anyway. But the Flight 37 scene is really, it's rough, but it's really strong. That's the one that kind of, for me, that's one of the things that kind of stayed with me from the series overall, is that whole scene.
Yeah, and it's such a great, it's such a great moment where you go, you already know the setup is that a Homelander is a douche and he's not a nice guy, but this really brings it home, because he doesn't really care about the people on this plane. He's not that concerned, but then you're watching, oh man, he really doesn't care, like, at all.
Right. And it's funny because I rewatched season 1, and I had kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, I kind of forgot about him knocking the plane out of the sky in the very first episode.
Right.
So in a way, it's kind of like, hey, we were already told he does stuff like this, because there's a lot of people on that plane. There's a kid. We see a kid at the window. He doesn't care about killing innocents.
No, he just does not.
But at least, even if it's horrible, at least we know there's a motivation behind what he does in season 1. The first episode, because he feels that Stillwell is being, in his mind, she's being blackmailed by the mayor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas this, oops,
exactly.
My heat vision fucked up the controls. Let him die.
Right. This is the this is like the serial killer shit. Like you can tell, like, okay, so I'm thinking that this guy actually kind of really loves killing people. I mean, he's basically been raised as a god, and he has no empathy for those that are not powerful. I mean, he doesn't have empathy for anyone really, but he truly does see himself as their god.
Right. He's a complete sociopath. He's about
exactly.
I'm not going to get into semantics over what makes a sociopath as opposed to a psychopath, whatever. I go sociopath because it's really about what we were just talking about. His total lack of empathy. He's unable, and the only thing that might graduate him to psychopath is having to watch him fake it and put and it's always funny when he does, because it reminds me, and again, I think the actor is excellent in the role. It creeps the hell out of me, whatever, but they do it in such a way, and it's deliberate, of course. It reminds me of when you would watch like an old, not old, but a daytime soap opera episode, and when the bad guy's clearly lying, he might as well be twirling his mustache, whatever. Whenever you hear Homelander, when he's talking, quote unquote, like on camera or to the press, whatever, and you go, really, you're not picking up on how disingenuous he is, how insincere he is? He's like, what if A-Rod was a killer superhero? No, he's basically. Yeah, I don't know why I just decided to knock Alex Rodriguez, but I did. Whatever. It's also, but what's interesting, and this is now going to hook to the other thing that's really, truly significant about the episode. There's a number of significant things about the episode, but, we're only going to focus on a couple, is on one hand, you've got a character like Homelander, who, as we just said, total sociopath. I don't know necessarily if he enjoys killing, although he probably does. I think it's more that it doesn't mean anything to him. So like a god, as you say. So it's he might as well be swatting flies. He doesn't give it any thought. It's just
Right.
a flick of the vision, whatever. And then you can then kind of see the almost practically polar opposite of him. And I don't mean with a character like Starlight, though that might be, one could say that as well. I'm going back to Frenchie again. Because Frenchie is someone who obviously has been, and as we hear, has been responsible for the death of people before, a number of people. But it has taken its toll on him. He does feel it. It does bother him. And
Yes.
in this same episode where you have a character like Homelander, who clearly doesn't care that he's going to send, what is it, like 123 people? I didn't write the number down, whatever, to their death, and without really giving it a second thought. We then see, this is this episode where we meet who's referred to for a while as the female.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing, actually. I think the title of the episode is actually "The Female, the Species." There's actually a lot of storylines throughout the episode that are focusing on different female characters, like the Queen Maeve stuff and so on. Also, I love the Flight 37 thing. Kind of also shows us that Queen Maeve is not Homelander. She will eventually go along with this, but this has taken a toll on her. I'm not saying it excuses it, but but at that point there isn't anything she can do. So
Right.
she doesn't. It's not like it's not like she's like classic Wonder Woman with an invisible jet. She can all load them up, alongside the plane or something. But getting back, what I was trying to say was with Frenchie, and just what he does is the introduction to that female, and that's the female also acts as something that really kind of activates Frenchie's empathy to a great degree, much to the chagrin of Butcher and Mother's Milk and everybody else. And it just shows how he might almost be too empathetic, so like I said, he's like the total opposite of someone like Homelander, who's just this soulless creature. I don't know.
Yes.
Blah blah blah.
Blah blah blah. Yeah, they come into a pretty sketchy situation, and he sees a woman who needs help, and he's not wasting any time to determine whose side she's on, if this is a good idea or a bad idea. He just knows that he needs to free her.
Right. It's interesting because he's with that group of people, and each one of them is led by a totally different type of motivation and what their personalities dictate. Mother's Milk is he's super practical. He's practical. He's pragmatic. It's not that he doesn't care, but he also knows, he can see the forest for the trees, and he's one like,
Yep.
we need to stick to he's the guy who says we need to stick to the plan. He's the one who gets upset the fact that Frenchie is the guy who never sticks to the plan.
Yes.
Because it's like what you were saying before, Mother's Milk is about control and just having some sort of order in his universe and the way things are going to proceed. And yes, we will get into that in season 2. I have a little bit of an issue with that, but we'll get there. And each one, but Butcher's motivations are he's a man led by obsession. Everything
Yes.
everything is plays second fiddle to the obsession to bring down Homelander. Everyone, and if there is collateral damage, so be it. So that's his, whatever. Huey is at this point, he doesn't even know what the hell's going on. He's torn. He's an emotional, wreck. He keeps seeing ghosts of, the ghost of his girlfriend everywhere he looks. It's a bit, but Frenchie is the one who's like the empath here, who really feels something right from the get-go and wants to help this girl that he sees, locked in the cage and all that stuff. So, yeah. And also, it tells us something more about his character, which really makes us, I think, really gravitate to him that much more because, in a show populated by, a lot of really bad people, you're going to gravitate to like, oh, he's actually got a heart. He's one of the few people who, he's one of the few people who clearly, wears it on his sleeve, so it's very nice. So we get to the 5th episode. That's where we get the Believe Expo. Expo, that was the word I was looking for. Which I guess, and it's there we get, Starlight going off script and kind of blowing up what had happened to her and everything else, and also her reaction to how this whole huge religious, convention, whatever you want to call it, community together, maybe she just wasn't aware of what their stance was before, or maybe because she's achieved this significantly greater celebrity status, she's just now she's become more aware because she's being asked to address it directly herself. So the fact that they clearly are anti-gay, anti-other religions, and all that kind of stuff, which is really unsettling. I'm pretty sure they were probably like that all along, but she just wasn't aware of it because maybe she wasn't exposed to it in the same way that she is now that she's, Starlight or Citizen Starlight as she eventually becomes now.
Well, yeah, and she went from being a part of this world to now expected to be represented as a leader in this world. That's a very different place to hang your hat.
Yeah. And I love that it's throughout this series, in both seasons 1 and half of season 2, I do appreciate that they are taking the time to target things outside of just, comic book tropes. They are going after other, like we mentioned Disney before, wow, going after Disney, welcome to South Park. But here, I really appreciate that the way they go after basically a lot of the religious hypocrisy that happens in this country, especially among the evangelicals, which we've seen whether it be what's going on with, how can they still support, someone like Donald Trump, to the number of scandals that have happened that date back to, you can go back to the days of, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker and, and Swaggart and all the rest of them. And the fact that we know already from an earlier episode that the Ezekiel, who is the character who has the stretching abilities, which we've seen there's several comic book characters that they've lifted that from, but we see that he's clearly a big old hypocrite himself because we saw him in basically the gay club, engaging in sex, on either side of the room and stuff. So I just like that they really chose to target stuff like that. I really find the target that they do in season 2 to be very interesting, but we'll wait till we get there before I talk about that. But the other thing I guess that's a major about this episode, was a couple things. We start getting into the whole Compound V thing and the fact that there are Compound V babies with lasers. That might be one of the most insane little action sequences I've ever seen in my life, quite frankly.
Yeah, yeah, it was certainly different.
He's using the baby as a gun. It's like, come on. I think he might even shake it a little, like an angry nanny or something, which references something he said earlier in the season, actually, to get to rip up. Oh, by the way, something one of the things I do really enjoy about this show. Anyone who's a kid has grown up with Superman, but we never really. I don't know how much we ever gave thought to the whole heat vision thing. It does get used very prominently in that Man of Steel movie I mentioned before, but real overall, when we start talking about the Superman abilities, we're usually talking about him flying, his strength, and that sort of thing. Homelander seems to really rely on that ability more than anything else, quite frankly, other than maybe his own brute strength.
Yes.
It's used so brutally all the time. The way people are just ripped and shredded apart, it's just, it's a very violent show.
It is. It's not for those who get queasy.
And speaking of violence, and just to the end of the episode, we find out that the female, or Kamiko, she actually, other than being able to, leap around and pretty much brutally, kill people, she's actually a healer, like Wolverine is, so to speak. So and the thing I loved about that reveal and that scene at the end when she's fighting, I think she's trying to save Frenchie from Black Noir, who shows up, so she kind of fights with him in the alley and such. I think it's Black Noir, right? The use of the song "Ain't No Sunshine."
Yes.
Putting it number one, it's one of my all-time favorite songs anyway. And it seems like every show now that we do these major mega podcast profiles on, uses music very well. Obviously, Umbrella Academy probably more than all three, but the Doom Patrol certainly does music from time to time, and this show certainly uses music from time to time. But what I love, and we were talking about this the other day offline, I love when music is used on us in a scene, and they do something inventive about it. It's not merely playing on the soundtrack or playing in the room somewhere. You know, they kind of cue it to the moment of the scene. And what they do here is that they actually stop the song and then start it again during.
Yes.
The only thing I can think of that was like that, for anyone who watches The Americans, if you remember the great final episode of The Americans, and I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it or maybe they're watching and haven't gotten to it, but they use the song With or Without, the U2 song. Is it not With or Without You? Is it? Oh wow, I'm forgetting which U2 song it is. No, it is With or Without You, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's With or Without You. Oh my god, it's a good thing Brian would have known. God damn it. But I'm pretty sure it's With or Without You. And I think they stopped the song and then started again during the scene. And I remember going at the time, like, I couldn't recall if I'd ever seen that before. And now when I saw them do that in The Boys, I kind of wonder I almost wonder if they got inspired by that, because it's such a very, well, obviously it's deliberate, but it's done for an effect. And it really works really well.
Yes, it really does. The music that they've used throughout the entire first season it's great because it is all over the map, but they have managed to hit a home run with it every time. So I mean, you can get anything from the Spice Girls to the Damned in one and John Lee Hooker in the next scene, and somehow they have made it they've made it flow. It is not a difficult producing a motion picture or, for a show, a soundtrack that has some sort of fluidity is not an easy task when there's so much in the world to choose from. But you usually do try to kind of keep it within some sort of a similar realm, and they're all over the place. And somehow they've managed to, it's because they're using music to fill in the pieces and not music to just take a sound.
Right, absolutely. It's also always nice when the music. I mean, obviously, a lot of times when music is used on a TV show or a movie, whatever, it's to set a tone or a mood, and that's fine. I mean, that's what scores are for, quite frankly. To help, underscore, no pun intended, or accentuate, the moment, whatever. But when something takes the next step up, where it really becomes an intrinsic part of the scene and, really is used to that extent. It's really kind of nice. I mean, obviously there are examples of that, you can't have a shark attack in Jaws without the Jaws music. It's part of it. It's, it's the heartbeat of the scene. And when you use these songs like that, I mean, like in Umbrella Academy, I mean, those fight scenes are not interesting without the music. They're just fight scenes. They're like, all right, that's cool, okay. But you put in the Queen song, all of a sudden, like, oh, this is great. This is it's what makes it work. It almost becomes the thing that helps drive the scene more so than even the action itself. You mentioned the Spice Girls. I don't know if I think it, and because I didn't put a note about this, but now I'm realizing I have. It's one of the things that made me laugh the most in season 1. It might be in the next episode, which is where we're up to anyway. And if I'm wrong about that, I apologize to anyone listening. If they know which episode it is, I apologize. When Billy Butcher gives Mother's Milk the whole spiel about the Spice Girls, and he starts talking about, what happened to each one of them after they had broken up and how they're the team. And he goes through this whole thing. And Mother's Milk is basically, how the fuck do you know so much about the Spice Girls? And I don't know why. There's not much to it, but it made me laugh so much. Because I'm going, yeah, he knows a little bit too much. I mean, I guess he's knowing about one or two, but he pretty much knows like the life stories of all of them. It's really bizarre. Even though we sort of kind of get a little bit of an explanation for that later on. But anyway, we are up to the 6th episode, and that's the one where we get Annie kind of, I feel that's the one where Annie starts to stand up for herself, kind of building on what happened at the Believe Expo. So, I mean, she stands up to Stillwell, she stands up to Queen Maeve, You know, I think I had liked her character before, but I didn't love the character.
Right.
I think in that episode, that's where my appreciation for her character kind of grew, because she was kind of standing up for herself and it wasn't just about that specific incident. It's just that overall, because she is getting bullied and patronized and used here, throughout the first 5 episodes of the season. So I really kind of like going, hey, you go, girl. You know, I really enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it goes from having a view where she's almost a little bit of a goody two shoes to actually seeing her step into her new role as a leader, and owning that. And it may not match what the Seven wants her to be in their version of leadership, but it's real leadership, and she's showing what she's made of.
Right, and also, I think from this point on, because I don't recall it really playing much of a part in a previous episode. I know I'm pretty sure there must have been at least one scene that was in a previous episode that I didn't mention before. But I really like the resulting kind of odd little occasional back and forth we get between Queen Maeve and Annie from this point on, and because this is the time where Annie finally stands up to her, and I like how that relationship kind of changes over the course of the series, and we see a bit more into the humanity Queen Maeve either has or that she's aware that she lost to a certain degree because of her years in the Seven and pretty much just being around Homelander alone, I guess.
Yeah, and Annie kind of helps Maeve realize what's important to her.
Right, exactly. Because she brings out the starlight in all of us. Anyway. One of the things I really enjoyed about this season 1 overall, we meet in this episode, and this is actually a total creation for the series, not from the comics. So give them total credit for coming up with a great idea character, even though his time is relatively brief on the series. Mesmer, the Haley Joel Osment character. First of all, getting Haley Joel Osment to do this was just perfect casting.
That was great.
Because pretty much anyone watching knows who he is. We
Yes.
all, he has popped up in a couple other things, and it's always the same reaction. It's like, oh my God, it's Haley Joel Osment. Geez, look at Haley Joel Osment, whatever. But the fact that he was, for a minute and a half, he was like this massive child star. Everyone remembers The Sixth Sense and so on, whatever. And the fact that this character was a child actor who's on the Mesmerizer TV series, which I love because it's just basically, all right, so the look of it and the logo and everything says Law and Order, but the idea of it is basically The Mentalist, except it's the Mesmerizer.
Oh my God, right?
Oh, it's, again, I love that they can, well, hey, by the way, we're going to take a little shot at all these, crappy procedurals from like the 90s. Bing, bing. But, love the concept, love the character. We finally, again, that's also one of those popular superpowers, popular, right? You know what I mean? That I was waiting to see. Is anyone going to have the ability to read minds? Because, I'm surprised they don't have like one telepath on the Seven, but here we go. Apparently the only telepath in town is kind of, like what we were saying when we were making the analogy about Pop Club before. He literally is a former child star, both in real life and on the series. So it's very meta casting. And finally, that's how we finally start to get a little bit of the backstory of, who had been at that point only referred to as the female. That's how we find out her name is Kamiko, and we start learning about her, what happened with her with the Philippines and the Shining Light Liberation Army. And every time I hear that, I keep thinking wasn't that the same name of a terrorist group that was in the movie Network? It probably wasn't, but I wish I had looked it up before the podcast, because it would be kind of amazing if it was, because it just sounds like it to me. But if anyone wants to check out that while you're listening, go ahead, go Google that. Anyway, go back in time and tell me.
Message us in the non-existent comments.
Oh, it's so funny when I go on the actual podcast host page, and there's like 2 or 3 comments in the last 4 years. And they're like, oh, great podcast, 2 years, 7 months ago. And I was like, no one ever comments, It's fun. And also the other really massive, major, important thing about that episode is that we start to get some insight into just what it is that Butcher's axe that he has to grind with Homelander. We learn that he believes that Homelander had raped his wife and then she went missing. And at the time, I think he believes that. I don't know. I wasn't clear if Butcher. Oh yeah, right. Because he still wants to keep hope alive that she's missing and not dead. Because the whole thing that happens with later on with the tombstone in a later episode. So okay.
Right. And can we say, if there's going to be a reason to want to seek revenge on somebody, that's a pretty good one. That's going to piss you off.
Yeah, look.
Like accidentally blowing up your girlfriend. That's a problem. But Vaughn thinks it's, $45,000 will cover that. So that's a $45,000 mistake. But something like this, there's no reparation for this. So you're going to have to seek justice on your own. Right.
I'm fine with it because it works for the show and it makes sense for that character. It becomes one of those things where I get torn. Again, I have no issue with it on the show. I wouldn't downgrade it or critique it really based on that per se. My only concern sometimes is, it's the guy. Obviously it's more about the fact that she's missing, I think, is what makes it, is what probably for me is what saves it. If it was purely, my wife was raped revenge. And now I want revenge, or my wife was raped, only because that's just been done to death.
Yes, but he does have her missing is it's going to help push our plot forward and make sense of why he would keep going.
Yes, absolutely. That like I said, that's the saving grace of that, and it makes it make more sense. Because in my mind, I kept thinking, God, if Homelander raped someone, wouldn't he kill them? Then. Literally, but then that's what we used to say about Superman.
It's a good point. We've seen via surveillance how quickly things can go wrong.
Right, exactly. And I remember being a kid and we all knew what sex was at that point. And we were like, Superman can't have sex with anyone. When he finishes, wouldn't he just right through the person?
It would ruin somebody. So clearly he has. Probably has some
restraint.
Restraint to. This is the weirdest fucking conversation I know. Because of what we're talking about. But when you're talking about the actual realistic dynamics, clearly he does have some ability to restrain, but. We don't know if she's dead or alive, and he doesn't know if she's dead or alive, and he's going off of hope and assumption.
Yep, it's like I said, it's one of the ongoing mystery plots of the season that's kind of keeping us going as we go from episode to episode. And as we get to the next episode, which is the 7th one, that's when we get the 7 meeting with Homelander, and where basically Huey is kind of exposed. To start. I'm not sure why he doesn't show the pictures of the other ones since he's got all the members from the phone that he got from Mesmer, but not important. It's more about the Huey thing here, and how they then believe that she may or may not be an actual traitor herself. And I think that's where Maeve actually sticks up for her, if I'm not mistaken. Which shows how that moment between them in the previous episode may have actually been an unexpected bonding moment between those two characters.
Right.
What else is significant in that? Well, now I'm pretty sure we already knew how brutal a person Butcher could be before this episode. Pretty sure we knew. In fact, the character's name is Butcher. Just coincidence, I'm sure. What he does to Mesmer is pretty fucking brutal. Wow. I did not. I have to say, maybe I was Annie in that scene because I was a little naive to that. I did not expect him to go to that extent. and that was kind of hard. That was a little hard to watch.
Yes.
It was cool, but it was hard to watch. And I guess again, as we're rushing towards the final episode of the season, we start filling in a lot of gaps, and this is where all like any number of backstory things start getting filled in, and we start getting a fuller picture of so many things. And in this episode, we start learning a lot more about Homelander's past, who
right
up to this point is in many ways probably the most mysterious character on the series, because he just seems to be just that. He just seems to be Homelander and nothing else. And I believe they referenced throughout the show. I think he talks about in a different episode how long ago he even gave up the idea of having a secret identity or anything like that. So, which means what he wears, that's all he ever wears.
Right. That's got to be uncomfortable from time to time. You know how many times you would sit down and like try to stand up and snag your own self on that cape?
Yeah, and a cape like that too, with the flag with the epaulets and whatever. But I think it's so, because that was the note I had about Homelander's past. So this is the episode where we just start finding about how he was basically a baby in a lab.
Yes, okay. And I think this is so great because it's so important because there's all this talk about how he's an experiment basically, and how he's his greatest failure. And you look at Homelander, who has, as we said before, kind of considers himself a god, and infallible. Right. When his creation himself and his creator considers him a failure. I think that is such an important part of who Homelander is psychologically. His desire, as we've seen, his desire that reaches into a world of fetishism, with having a mother, and his constant belief that he is above everything else, when somewhere he knows he's not what they wanted him to be.
Right. I'm imagining when he calls him a failure, it's because I think it just becomes more evident that they've created a thing.
Yes.
But they didn't. But not a person. He's not.
Right. He's not a person.
And the fact that Homelander sees himself as a god, which is understandable based on his abilities, whatever. But it's because he's not human. He's just there's nothing. Because he has no humanity. So it's interesting because there's many reasons it's interesting, but I like it because in many ways Homelander is as we said from the top, Homelander is supposed to be a riff on Superman, who is probably of all superheroes the one people will most point to and say is not including the ones who actually quote unquote are gods, like Thor or something like that, but Superman's the one who's he's godlike. And sometimes people can't relate to him as a character because he's, so infallible, blah, 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 and all that other kind of stuff. But the interesting thing, and obviously the major difference is Superman's flaw is his humanity because he cares so much.
Right.
And if he could save everyone on the planet at all times, he would. And one of the things that's interesting is him coming to grips, he can't do that. You can't save everyone. And then you have a character like Homelander, who is someone who doesn't care. And, that part of his brain or his heart, whatever, never grew, never happened. And so they've, much like scientists always do when they're trying to create this great thing, genetic experiments for abilities, they've created a monster. It goes back to the days of Frankenstein, except that the monster in Frankenstein actually, at times, depending on the depiction, has empathy, cares, and Homelander doesn't. So
nope.
The only thing, again, we still are going to feel the way we feel about Homelander, and rightfully so, but at least we start to see, as we peek behind the curtain or the flag or whatever you want.
The flagged cape.
Yeah, it's I love that idea so much. It's so perfect, quite frankly. It's, again, especially what's been going on in the last couple of years.
Absolutely.
It's getting this insight. At least at least there's some explanation for why he is the way he is beyond just being, oh, I've got all this power, so I'm power mad and I can do whatever. It's like, yeah, there's some of that, but if you were basically, not a test tube baby, a test lab baby, I should say. He didn't grow up with parents. He didn't grow up with any kind of parenting, whatever. All he had was that blanket. I remember when I was doing the rewatch, I was trying to remember the blanket. What's the story with the blanket again? And then I remember, like, oh yeah, the blanket. Nice. Anyway. It's funny, we get to the final episode of the season, which is called You Found Me. Just realized I mentioned the character Sitwell, but it's kind of interesting not to have mentioned, Elizabeth Shue, this entire thing where I was like, wow, I haven't seen Elizabeth Shue in I don't know how long, but she's been.
Oh, right.
I
I was super excited to see her in something again.
I was like, Elizabeth, I didn't IMDb you. I didn't look up how old you were, but you were looking good for someone you were doing movies back in the early 80s.
Right?
So that's, add it up. That's like almost 40 years ago. Good Lord. Great to see her on this. And great to be part of probably one of the biggest shocks of the entire series. Because there are things that happen from moment to moment on the series which are like, oh, God, ooh. Did anyone in the scene you kind of know it's about to happen shortly before, but, rewind the clock of at least a couple minutes earlier. Did anyone expect Homelander to kill Stillwell like that?
I did. I knew that there was maybe not as soon as it happened. I guess that would be it. Not as soon as it happened. I did not think it was going to be a season 1 situation, but I could see that the second she did not give him the control, or at least the idea of the control that he demanded, she was going to be toast, and that she knew it too.
Right. No. It's one of those things that made perfect sense at the moment, but I think, like you, I thought that was going to be a continuing thing.
Right. I thought we were going to hold on to that. That was going to be there for a while.
Because his issue that we see as it comes up, especially in the last few episodes of season 1, and it's a continuing thing throughout season 2 as well. It's his feeling that he's being lied to. He doesn't, and he wants to lie, because it all goes back to his background, how he came to be and his existence and all these things he didn't know about. And then, it's like one thing after the other he keeps finding out about. And, again, they play on it a little bit in the series. They the whole, he should be able to detect the heartbeat and know if someone's lying by, kind of like a lie detector, because Superman does actually have that ability. So I did but of course, he's not always correct about it. He kind of misunderstands certain things, but that's another season 2 issue. I guess it was just in the moment and in the horrific way it happens. It was kind of like, oh.
Yeah, it's that's pretty brutal.
Yeah. Well, this is quite the coming out party for Homelander in this episode. I mean, as much as we've seen all the horrors of what he did in the first 7 episodes, discovering that he himself is the guy behind the super terrorist, popping up around the globe. I guess he had A-Train's help, but it was still pretty much his doing. So it reminded me of there's always been this kind of ongoing debate with comic book fans for many years, specifically with the character, more so of Batman than anybody else. There's always been speculation, or not speculation, but we debate over Batman in Gotham City. Would there be all these other villains if there was no Batman? Did having Batman there end up creating these other villains, or were the villains there first? And the way I've always seen it is Batman appears on the scene before the supervillain. That's the original version of the story. Obviously, things get retconned, things are different, whatever. But that's my thing. Is Batman came there because he just wanted to fight, crooks and whatever, because, like the crook who shot, his parents and whatever. And then all of a sudden end up, meeting like the Joker and the Penguin and the whatever. Now they do crap at the Gotham City, that horrible TV series where all the villains are there first and then Batman shows up. Shut up. I hate that show so much. Sorry.
It's the savior creates the sickness theory in the city.
So I love that they take it to the literal extreme with this show where he actually has created supervillains for them to fight, and thus giving, and one of the plot lines, which is kind of a MacGuffin-y kind of thing throughout the season, is by doing that, then Congress will have to move to make the Seven part of their military setup, and they can, help fight their wars for them, and so on and so forth. But I remember thinking, we're ready to get super villains in season 2, and so far, not really.
Well, and it's also a great, again, it's a really great comparison to how. I'm sure that you saw the meme out there, but it really is a great comparison to how often our own country, any country that is a leader country, is often looked at, in the sense that you create the power you have by creating struggle everywhere else.
Right. I think it's fairly, I don't know if I want to call it common knowledge, but it should be. I mean, you look over the last 40, 50, whatever number, however far you want to go back, probably go back to at least the 50s, I would say. And, it's usually like it's the CIA, or maybe it's just the U.S. military in general. I mean, how many despots and dictators and just out and out horrible leaders of countries were in some way assisted or propped up or, discreetly financed by us in some form. So it's like, exactly. This is like the superhero version of that,
Yes.
It's like, it would be like, again, I'm not going to say this is factually correct. I'm just doing it just to simplify the names. Like, one could say, well, we created Saddam Hussein in order to have to take him down. So it's like, that's essentially what Homelander is doing with all these super terrorists.
Right. Putting somebody who has malintent into power, knowing what their plan would probably be in order to gain control over certain areas and continue to remain the leaders.
Exactly. I also, by the way, just to be geeky about it, it's a thing that it starts here and then it continues again through season 2, but I love the fact that Homelander is the one who keeps insisting on calling them super villains, which is pure comic book goodness.
Oh my God, I know.
And everyone else keeps saying super terrorists.
And he always corrects it every time, and he is always pissed off about it.
Yeah. Well, which is pretty common for him, but anyway. Again, finally, you do get the thing with Starlight helping Huey and the boys escape, which is kind of cool because, it shows that they had their issue. They still have the issue at this point. But she still believes that innately that Huey is a good person, despite the fact that it seems like he's been lying to her and using her and whatever. And there is a level of truth. There's a lot of truth to that. But he does also care about her as well, and thus she helps him. So I really I like that whole sequence.
Yes.
And everything pretty much builds to the finale, the final moments where the aforementioned, Homelander kills Sitwell. And I remember going, Butcher's got to set up the explosives now. What's going to happen to that baby? But instead he wakes up on a lawn, and then he looks up to see that Becca is actually alive. And apparently she's been raising Homelander's child. And that is the boom, smash cut. Hey, season 1's over.
Yes. And she looks surprised when she walks out onto her porch and sees him too. So we do also kind of have the idea that she wasn't expecting to ever see him again. Right.
And obviously once we get into season 2, we discover why she would think that because of the life she's been having to lead in this area. This ain't just the suburbs, it turns out to be.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a pretty darn tight season 1. It's a lean 8 episodes. You can't accuse it of any flab. So They definitely learned the lesson that other superhero series didn't. Chiefly like the Netflix Marvel series, which had always been like 13 episodes, which means they're all anywhere from 3 to 5 episodes too long. I mean, The Boys, I wished it had been 10 episodes because I wanted so much more of it, but no, it was almost like the perfect helping, I thought.
Yeah, I didn't feel like anything ran too long. I don't feel like we had not only no filler episodes, but really no filler scenes. I mean, there's always places you could cut a little bit, but I really don't. I mean, it's very lean and to the point and entertaining the entire time.
Yeah, and probably more so than either of the previously covered. Well, I hate to call them superhero series or comic book series, but that's what they all are in some way or another. This show or this series, for at least these 8 episodes, is very focused on pushing forward. And even though we do get the opportunity to tell some expositional backstory, whether it be seeing, Butcher and his wife before everything went horribly wrong, or Homelander's backstory, or things like that, or the stuff about Kamiko, it's done in fairly expedient fashion.
Yes.
So you don't spend a half or an entire episode on someone's backstory. We get it. We get enough. We move on. The show is constantly moving forward, which it helps in so many ways. So this is not a show anyone's going to complain about the pacing. Whereas people complain about great shows, but I can't watch that show. I'd say it's too slow. Boys is not slow. Boys,
no, it's not.
It does not take its time, and it also makes it an extremely bingeable series because it's like, oh, I guess I got to watch the next one, which is one of the reasons people might have gotten a little bit annoyed at season 2, turning out, oh, we're going to just release a few and then piecemeal the rest out to you guys. And it was like, no, we want our bit. I had my whole weekend built up around this. How dare you?
Well, and it will be interesting to see. I mean, I know we're in about halfway, but it's interesting because some series you will binge watch and the whole story comes in together so nice and neat, and you love it. But they don't work separately. Like, it's too much time in between that story. I don't think we're going to feel that with this because everything just kicks so fast.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to lose anything, but it'll be interesting just to see if season 2 versus how we watch season 1, if it leaves us with anything different, with any different feeling on how we absorb that story.
Right. Well, it's also interesting because I haven't looked into it. Haven't done my due diligence research, whatever. So I don't know at what point they completed production or have completed production. I'm assuming they've completed at this point because the final episode will air, I think, October 9th, and we're already in mid-September, so I'm pretty sure it's done. I don't know if they completed everything before the COVID-19 shutdown happened, worldwide or not. It's interesting because you start wondering about, are things coincidental or not? There's a line in season 2, which, I'm going to say is probably just a coincidence, but one might have thought, oh, they're making a George Floyd reference here, or talking about someone's foot on someone's neck or something.
Right.
Maybe, I don't know. I honestly, it's possible. I honestly don't know. But might be something worth looking into.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure because I'm pretty sure that the second season was approved to go before the first season was even released.
Yes. Yeah, they were really high on the show from early on, so it was one of those early green lights kind of things. Okay, let me. I'll try to do this in a bit more quicker fashion than I might have otherwise, just to save on time here. I did mention in the early preamble I was going to just talk about a few of the differences between what happened in season 1 and the actual comic book. Some of those things I've already talked about, so that actually helps cut this down a bit. Don't have to go into the rape thing again, so that's nice.
We don't need to talk about it twice.
We need not go there again. So I'm just skimming over things I have jotted down here. So oh, okay. So one of the things on the series, like we said, we've got the seven. You're the one powerful super team, like the Justice League of America. Huey's initial mission after the death of his girlfriend, and when he eventually teams up with Butcher, is to infiltrate the Seven's headquarters and to plant a bug. In the comic book, Huey actually goes on several missions to take down all those other lesser super teams before he eventually graduates to the ultimate big leagues and taking on, a mission against the Seven. So like I said, I mentioned those other teams earlier. So imagine he does things in order to take down like the Teen Titans and the Suicide Squad before taking on the Justice League. That's essentially what they did there. Obviously they want this to be an 8-episode season, not an 18-episode season, which is probably one of the reasons you cut that crap down. I mean, not to say it's crap, it's probably very good. In fact, his first kill in the comic book series is actually a member of one of those lesser than, teams. I'm not going to say the name of that character. I didn't write it down, but I remember what it is. I just don't want to say that word. It rhymes with frock. It's Blarney. I'm not going to say it. Blarney Rooster. Anyway, but when he does that, it's actually totally in self-defense, and it could be seen as even accidental, which, unlike the translucent murder, it's pretty deliberate. One last thing about Huey. I don't think anything else I have jotted down here is about him. Fun thing about the comics, to TV translation. In the comics, Huey is drawn to essentially be a dead ringer for Simon Pegg. And for anyone who's listening who might be, say, like a Marvel comic books fan, you might recall many years ago when the artist Brian Hitch was first drawing the comic book The Ultimates, which is basically the Avengers. In fact, it's probably in many ways the blueprint for the MCU version of the Avengers. He was the guy to draw the previously white cigar chomping, one-eyed Nick Fury, not just as a black man, but as a dead ringer for Samuel L. Jackson. So years later, when it came time to cast Nick Fury in that, I guess it was the first Iron Man movie, well, you might say the casting was already died or something like that. Actually, no one would say that. So by the time you get to this series, Simon Pegg is clearly too old to play the character, but it's kind of cool that they went really meta and they cast him as Huey's dad instead. So basically, in the comics, Huey is a short Scotsman, but on this TV series, he's a tall American. Skip. Oh, one other little thing about Huey, which is kind of interesting because it changes the whole rationale and motivation for the character. In the comics, Huey and Annie actually date for several months, or at least a few months, before he even finds out that she's Starlight. So the nature of their relationship is pure, not just from the initial meeting, but for quite some time until he discovers who she actually is. The whole premise of the boys themselves, they're actually in the comics throughout their time in the comics. They are a team that's actually sanctioned and funded by the CIA, and they can pretty much get away with all sorts of crap that the TV version could never do. So that's kind of an interesting little difference there because, obviously on the show they're kind of operating on their own, except for when they occasionally try to contact that Mallory person. But in the comics, they're actually, they're like the secret little subsect of the CIA or something. Something super dark. We talk about the show being dark. The comic is 10 times darker. You might have gathered that just when I described the rape situation earlier on. The other great, horrible example is that whole incident involving Flight 37, which is pretty much one of the darkest things that happens in the TV series, I would say. In the comics, that plane, that actually takes place on September 11th, 2001. It goes down pretty much the same way, except Homelander ends up sending that plane to go crash into the Brooklyn Bridge. So, yeah. It's a little different. Another thing that's really crazy different from the comics to the show is in the comics, eventually, all the boys have superpowers. It's not just the female or Kamiko. And it turns out Mother's Milk and the female have actually had their abilities since they were children, and the rest of them get abilities by taking Compound V. Compound V becomes the thing. They're all on Compound V now. And something I'm pretty sure the show is not going to do. Speaking of mother's milk, you might be wondering the whole time you've watched now a season and a half at this point, what's the story behind that name? Well, he's got a really bizarre origin story. Let's just say it involves him having a birth defect that requires him to, even up to not to present day, to constantly be drinking his mother's breast milk, hence the name Mother's Milk. And I think that's also part of how he gets his abilities. Obviously, they chose not to do that for the show. I don't know if I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't remember if maybe that's what led to the whole, hey, let's do this breast milk thing with Homelander instead. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure they decided we're going to keep his name, but we're never going to get into the history of Mother's Milk.
Yeah, I can't see the viewers loving that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's nothing that's presented about that character that comes off as bizarre or twisted. At most, it's the fact that he, as we discover early in season 2, he's got a bit of an OCD thing going on, but that might be a bit too much for people to deal with. Another major thing, finally, is the stuff with Becca Butcher in the comics. Yeah, she's actually pregnant while she's with Butcher, and he wakes up one night to discover that she's given birth, and the baby is basically shooting heat vision laser beams out of his eyes. Butcher kills the newborn in self-defense, and she actually has died in childbirth. So Butcher's belief that his wife was assaulted by a soup, that's what fuels his quest for vengeance there as well, but because she is dead. She died, she died right there. There is actually a little bit more to the Becca Homelander thing in the comics. I am choosing not to mention or get into it because I have this weird suspicion they may get into it on the show in later episodes, so I don't want to accidentally spoil something. But there is one other major difference that we'll just I'll wait till at least the end of the season. If it happens, then I will say, hey, that's from the comics. And if it doesn't happen, maybe then I'll mention it. Other than that, that's pretty much it as far as story-wise. I mean, there's a million other differences. I don't want to spend, another half hour doing that. Other than that, you get into the differences of, they did a lot of gender swapping for characters. Sitwell is a guy in the comic book. Mallory is a guy in the comic book. And a character that we're about to meet in season 2, Stormfront, is also a guy in the comic. And it's interesting because the character Stormfront in the comic books, kind of not interesting. Kind of a bore. There's not really that much to him. Kind of cartoonish, in fact. He's really basically honestly, he's like a neo-Nazi. He's a Hitler-loving thug, essentially. Get the buzz cut and everything. Which means he fit perfectly in this country. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, since now that I've actually skipped ahead citing a character that we don't meet until season 2, let's get to season 2. So
yes, let's do that.
So first episode is The Big Ride. So we're watching this, and this was our return to this universe after pretty much a year and change. I thought it was a pretty solid start to the season. But what did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was good. We kind of got to be reminded, because it's been enough time, to be reminded where we where all of our characters were coming from, and we didn't get left hanging on our cliffhanger from the last season. We get a little bit in that, and
right,
yeah.
Well, they do a nice job of, they kind of do two things at once. On one hand, we pick up the strands of where we left off last season. So there is a sense of, I wouldn't call it resolution, but okay, now we know where we are. And there's still always going to be a little ongoing mysteries with this show as well. I mean, right now, from the very first episode, we've established, they're fugitives. They're on the run. They're in hiding. Butcher is waking up in a parking lot somewhere in Fort Wayne, New Jersey. And, oh gosh, forgot about that. A-Train's in a coma, so that's why we know Starlight is safe, at least for now. Okay. Let me just, I gotta get to it here. The scene with Blind Spot. Maybe, is it wrong to laugh at that? Because I thought it was amazing, especially because, okay, the character is basically modeled after Daredevil.
Yes.
And there will be at least one specific listener who I've had for a couple of years I've had an ongoing thing about me insulting the Netflix TV show Daredevil, although I did like the last season of it finally, and him kind of it's David Gott. We all know who we're talking about. So
At this point, we all know.
yeah. There's like 4 listeners. You know who I'm talking about. So I laugh my ass off when the Daredevil like character is like, yeah, oh maybe, and then he goes, oh, what if I do this? I thought that was great. Which, of course, because they need someone to join the 7, because one of the things we didn't mention as much in our little house we ran through season 1 is the Deep is no longer on the roster. He got relegated to Sandusky, Ohio, if I recall. Basically
where we send every 90s music lover date rapist to go think about what he did.
Exactly. So he's basically cutting open the ribbon to water parks and stuff. Oh man, he's probably watching that Action Park documentary, by the way. Anyway, by the way, I am going to be talking about the stuff with the Deep this season because I find it very interesting. But I don't want to go there we're almost there. But after we say hello and goodbye to Blind Spot, that's when we do eventually shortly thereafter meet Stormfront. I forgot to look up who that actress is, although I feel like I've seen her in a number of things over the years. She seems very familiar to me, so I have IMDb open. I could just, fuck it. But again, she's a very different sort of character to join that, unit, so to speak. And we certainly discovered that even more so as the season has gone on. I gotta say something, and I know this is totally stupid and ridiculous, but I gotta say this. We talked a little bit about the music of this show. One of the things I really enjoy about the show is Huey's character is set up pretty much from the first 5 minutes of the series. He's a big Billy Joel fan. Confession, and it's not a guilty confession, it's just a confession. I am also a big Billy Joel fan. I have been since I was a very small little wee lad. In fact, his final words to his girlfriend before she's blown up by A-Train is actually talking about Billy Joel. We hear Billy Joel songs used riffs, a few times. One episode I think begins and ends with parts of Big Shot, whatever. And good Lord, the song "You're Only Human" seems to play a major part in these first few episodes of season 2. And I'm like going, I wonder how many people even remember this song. I literally can sing all the lyrics right now if I wanted to. Because I'm like, oh, that's the song with the video to take off on It's a Wonderful Life. And it was one of 2 singles that were on the Billy Joel's Greatest Hits 1 and 2 that were released in 1985. Yeah, I know something. But what's important about that song is more, it's a song about, depression and trying to convince someone not to commit suicide. And because he lost his girlfriend, and that's kind of reflecting what Huey's going through as well. But you have a character. I'm just calling my shot here, or I'm calling out the people on the show here. If you son of a bitches have a character named Stormfront, her character's name is Stormfront, and you don't use the song Stormfront by Billy Joel before the season is over, I am going to be very disappointed. I don't care if it's on the nose. I don't care. I want to hear some Stormfront. There's a storm front coming. It's not just the name of the song. It's the name of the goddamn album. I can't believe Huey hasn't even mentioned it at some point. So they better mention it.
I hope that they don't. And the whole joke is that there's going to be people out there that are huge fans, and they're going to think this is coming, and we're not going to give it.
Well, I'll be honest with you. In a later episode this season, because who cares if I skip ahead at this point? There is that whole sequence, whatever, where they're trying to escape or get to the other location by boat. and we're worried the Seven's going to find them. It's like I kept going, oh, this is when it's going to happen, because the whole thing with Stormfront is about being out on the sea and being in the boat, whatever.
Right.
It's perfect. And she'll attack him on the boat, and then it doesn't happen. It's like, oh, goddamn it. I still think Hurley caused John Locke's paralysis. I don't care. Anyway. Dear Damon Lindelof, sorry, my origin story was better than yours. Anyway. So back to episode 9, the big ride. Speaking of things that were surprising, or we didn't see. Okay, I will grant you that maybe most people did see Stewell getting whacked at the end of season 1. People saw it coming because of her lies to Homelander and so on. Did anyone see Raynor's head going boom?
Oh my God, no.
I was like, they just scattered her, And I was like,
Yeah, it's definitely. Yeah, I didn't see that one coming.
well, they're getting back to basics, because what did we say earlier? You got to blow up at least one person in an episode.
Yep.
But she's also because didn't expect it. Actually, one of the few. Well, should I say a few? Yeah, I'll go few. One of the few actors or performers, whatever, on the series that I actually knew who they were before the show. I mean, she's a name, and she actually plays a kind of a key part here. And then, and I also like the fact that we still haven't truly resolved that. I mean, I guess there is a suspicion that maybe Stormfront might be behind it. I don't think that's been. I don't think that's been proven as of yet, or I think it's just a theory right now. But I'm kind of wondering about it. What else happened? Oh, then you get the thing with and Starlight showing that she might have been that young naive little thing early on, and although after the whole Believe Expo revelation, she's obviously not that person anymore. And even though it's a little weird that she's wearing that outfit again, but although I understood why she is, but it was just kind of jarring that she's wearing that really not so PC outfit right now. But
yes.
But she's blackmailing that poor schmuck who's got the. I love that they just have people who have superpower abilities who are just like, I don't know, working in the IT department.
But it's great because it I think it's so important that they have these random not quite soups out there, because it does support the idea that she was in a position where she was almost trying out to be the fill-in space, and you know what I mean? If there was only 7 of them in existence, it wouldn't be anything to just, obviously these are going to be the superheroes.
Oh, absolutely. And also in all honesty, you're dealing with someone who's got an ability which, while it's interesting, I'm not sure how much mileage you could get out of it as far as being a superhero is concerned.
Yeah.
I understand he can have his limbs hacked off or removed, which kind of reminds me a little bit of a DC character that's called, I think, Arm Fall Off Boy or Fall Off Boy or something, who basically removes his arms and can remove his arms and hit.
That's what we call literal thinking.
Hey, well, by the way, get ready for it, because the character Nathan Fillion's going to be playing in the Suicide Squad movie is that character. They're calling him like TDK, which I think stands for the Detachable Kid or something. I think it's that. I'm pretty sure it's that character, and I've already sent a memo to James Gunn saying, "Hey, you know how you did really great with your music and like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and now you're doing the Suicide Squad movie. Please, 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 when you have this, whenever you introduce that Nathan Fillion scene, because I know who he's supposed to be, please use the song Detachable Penis. That you need to use that song. It has to be used. It must be used." And I'm see, now that I said this on a podcast, it's actually going to be preserved, more so than saying it on a Facebook
right.
page.
Now you have the proof.
I'm going to, wish I'd done that with Tarantino 10 years ago. Anyway, also, back to the episode, getting to one of the more interesting things. Actually, there's a bunch of interesting things. We get more with Edgar. We didn't mention that the finale was the revelation of Giancarlo Esposito being on the series at all. Which I kind of, only because he plays he's a much more visible character throughout season 2,
yes.
I guess.
Yes.
And now Giancarlo Esposito basically has to be in every show I like, to the point where it's like, I don't know, can I get sick of Giancarlo? I'm not sure. Because right now in the last year, he graduated from the Breaking Bad days because, you got him on the Better Call Saul. And you got him in The Mandalorian. And you got him as the voice of Lex Luthor in the goddamn Harley Quinn cartoon. And now he's on The Boys. I'm like, oh my God, he's everywhere. But he's good. And then the people were rumored they were going to cast him for, I'm drawing a blank. It's a character that we were just talking about in a movie. It'll come to me during the podcast, I think. People were saying that, there's a rumor that he was one of the possibilities they're looking at to play Doctor Doom in the MCU. And I'm not really on board with that. I'm not saying I'm sure he'd do a fine job. It's more like, does he have to be in everything? Come on, get Viggo Mortensen. God damn it. Anyway, but I want to ask you a question. We get a scene in this episode with the confrontation between Homelander and Edgar. And it's clear from the get-go, Edgar is not intimidated by Homelander, who obviously should be able to just, he can kill you like that.
Right.
Here's a question I have. And again, I've not read the comics. I don't know. Is it possible that since we do know that all these people or metas or whatever we call them, their abilities were created via this drug that Vought is behind with Compound V, whatever. Do they have a failsafe, especially where someone like Homelander is concerned? Is there something that they know that we don't know? Because right now, the way they've established Homelander's character, unlike, say, Superman even, we don't know of anything that's a weakness for him. He doesn't have a kryptonite that we know of. Because the only problems with Superman were kryptonite, magic, and magic is whatever. And if he's on a planet with a red, if he's in a universe where it's a red sun instead of a yellow sun, his powers are taken away. Whatever. It's not whatever. I mean, it's important. I get it. But we don't have any of it. But I'm wondering, like, it's not going to be like they're chipped or something, although they think the character, they all are chipped. I don't know if Homelander's chipped, though. Does Edgar have some way of putting Homelander down so that he wouldn't be worried? I'm just wondering if that's going to be a possible late season revelation or something like that.
There's got to be some sort of silent understanding at the very least. He brought in Stormfront without any knowledge on Homelander's. He didn't know this was happening.
Right.
So he clearly is doesn't feel like he needs to ask his permission. He is who he is, so he's got to have some understanding of who Storm, who she was, or Stormfront. I'm sorry, but who she is or what she is.
Right. Oh yeah. And by the way, just because you just did it, and it's totally fine if you want to jump around. But these 4 episodes, I don't give. It might be easier anyway, because you're right. I am wondering that as well, because as we discover in the latest episode, there's a heck of a lot more to Stormfront to her than just being, someone who's very social media savvy and also just as brutal a murderer as Homelander is. But then when we discover more about her in this latest episode,
but maybe even worse, because clearly she loves being a racist.
Well, yes, oh, I can't imagine where they get the ideas for these shows. Right. Anyway, so that's something that's interesting, and obviously with Homelander, you also in this episode we see the Homelander, the situation with Becca and Ryan, which is the son. And I kept thinking that was a different actor playing the kid from the end of season 1 to this season, but he might have just grown in a year and looks different. I don't know. I haven't looked that up. Might be the same actor. But then we get a sense of what that story is. And I guess, not that Becca's existence has been great while she's been raising this boy, because she's in this, that's more than just a gated community.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
I'm not really clear on how it works with all the other people there in the community, but when you have this whole wall thing, it's like, wait, are they all trapped there? There's certain aspects about that are kind of confusing to me that I think require more explanation.
Yep.
Is she the only one under surveillance? But what about that whole wall thing and to get in and out? Are they all experiments? Maybe I'm curious about that. But up until this point, he didn't know. So, he obviously found out between, at some point in that final episode and here. So now you're going to have this guy around. Basically, you're going to have your
worst stepdad ever, except for real dad.
Right. And you're going to have who they've set up for us to let me see how I can put this. I'm just going to, all right, you know what? I'm just going to say it. Fuck it. We've been set up to believe, from the way things have been described to us and the little bits, we have made the assumption that he is her rapist.
Right.
We should also be aware that might not necessarily be exactly true.
Yep.
By the way, the thing I talked about earlier, that in the comics, that's what I'm talking about. There is a revelation at some point later on that he actually did not rape her. I'm wondering if I was listening to the dialogue throughout these 4 episodes and watching him, and the fact that they're being very careful not to say certain things, I'm going, I wonder if, and then I did my little homework and like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if that's what they're doing on the show. Which would therefore be a much bigger blow that would be a massive blow to Butcher. I mean,
absolutely.
Oof. I mean, even right now, I think I have a little puke in my mouth just thinking about it. So that's an interesting storyline. And I will say, again, I'm skipping ahead, so there'll be less to say later. Probably one of the best things about this storyline for me, specifically when we incorporate Butcher back into it, which we've seen in the latest episode, is I've never had that much sympathy for the Billy Butcher character. Because what I was talking about before was like, I feel horrible for her. I thought that I don't have any feelings for him. He's like, yeah, his wife is missing. And it's horrible. I get that. But his performance and what happens in that episode, that is like, I actually started to really feel bad for him. Like I felt genuine sadness or emotion for his character, which I had not been the case before. And I attribute it a lot to Carl Urban's own performance. Oh, by the way, Carl Urban is one of the most underrated actors of the last 15, 20 years, by the way. He's no one talks about him this way, but he's one of those guys who I feel just seamlessly shapeshifts from one role to the other, like a Gary Oldman kind of a thing. I mean, he's freaking McCoy in he's the one good thing about those goddamn Star Trek movies. He's McCoy. He's Judge Dredd. He was in one of the Lord of the Rings movies. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he's definitely got he's got the chameleon adaptation. He really is. I expect that now that he is in something that people have in their homes, rather than on a big screen first, I just suspect we're going to see a lot more of him over the next 5 years.
Oh my God, I just realized we were actually talking about this the other day because we had mentioned that the people behind this show, are the people behind the Preacher series on AMC.
Yes.
And we were talking about that show for a little while, and I know one of your issues with the show, and I kind of agreed with it, was the actor might not have been the best for that series. Was it Dominic Cooper?
Yes, exactly.
I always got to remember because you have an actor named Dominic West and an actor named Dominic Cooper. I want to make sure I get the names right. He might not have been the best actor for that role. I think I was like semi-agreed. I attribute a lot of it to just the way the character was written. It was my bigger issue. All that aside, because I don't want to go off on the tangent, but just talking about Preacher now. But the one thing I do want to say, hey, how much better would that show have been if Carl Urban had been?
I'm saying.
Oh my God, because that's because he's got that would have. In fact, I'll say if they decide just like, hey, let's do a Preacher movie. Hey, Urban,
There you go.
there you go. That's him, and you don't need to spike up his hair. It's fine.
Right?
Exactly. A little bit. I know the character does have hair that's somewhat like that. You can do a little bit, but not. It shouldn't be all about the hair. And this has nothing to do with the fact that I don't have any. Okay. Anyway, let me get to the other thing about the episode, which also, and I'm going to talk about it in the way it moves throughout all 4 episodes. So we also clean this up a little bit. The stuff with the Deep. First of all, he meets Eagle the Archer. Again, but all the major comic book universes, they all have their speedsters, they all have their godlike character, they all have their archers. DC's got Green Arrow, among others, and Marvel, of course, has Hawkeye. And this character, from the little bits we get, I'm going to say he sounds a little bit more like a riff on Hawkeye than he is Green Arrow. Eagle the Archer sounds a bit more like Hawkeye anyway. He's got the bird name in it and whatever. Okay, he is essentially being recruited to the Church of the Collective. This is a storyline I thought I would not care for. I am all about this storyline. Because I mentioned before, one of the things I'm enjoying about the series is that they're taking shots at things other than just like comic book stuff. They're going after other targets and whatever. This is this is obviously about Scientology. And it's not that Scientology hasn't been satirized or spoofed or whatever to a certain degree before. We've seen that, that there's a certain cartoon on Comedy Central which has probably covered everything over the last 20 years in one form or another.
Right.
But what I really enjoyed about, there's a certain, I don't know if it's the right word for this series, there's a certain subtlety with it. On this, they're doing a very low pedaling of what this is all about. And I mean, I figured out what it was from the get-go. I love the gag of them constantly drinking Fresca, which, to me is just basically they don't want to be Kool-Aid, which is what this is a riff on, we're all drinking the Kool-Aid now. So we're all drinking the Fresca. Who picked Fresca? Brilliant choice. But I want to fast forward to the most recent episode. No, I don't. I forgot. I can't. The hallucinogenic tea that happens. Is it the next episode, hallucinogenic tea? Yes. It's the next episode. Who cares? The fact that they give the Deep's gills.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd bring this up.
Oh my God. It's Patton Oswalt.
It's so perfect. Who would ever think, what Patton Oswalt will be great for? Doing the voice of Gills. But here we are.
Oh my God. I mean, when that happened, it took me to it reminded me of something like out of the animated series on Netflix, Big Mouth, where there are times where you don't just have human characters or hormone monster characters. You have the vagina talks,
right? Yep.
or the pubes talk, or this talk, or a sperm cell talks, or whatever. So of course, yes, here Gills talk. Why not? And I love that they're just trying to pump up his whole self-worth.
Oh my gosh!
It's just, and I loved also that it wasn't just one scene. It's a few scenes. We come back to it a couple times. I was about to skip to the last episode, but that I do not want to. The only unfortunate thing about it, although there's no way they could have pulled this off without it being just ridiculous, obviously it has to be a result of him taking the dosed tea, whatever. But part of me was like, it'd be kind of cool if his gills now always talk to him with Patton Oswalt's voice.
They're friends now. Yeah, they're just friends.
Maybe at night maybe instead of how people light up a joint before they go to sleep, maybe at night he'll drink a little bit of tea before he goes to sleep and he can hang out talking to his gills.
catch up, I love that it shows how we have this whole episode of just this massive insecurity he has, why he keeps them covered, how much he hates himself because he thinks that it's disgusting. And then just his personality really, in the things we've seen him do previously, really supports this idea that he is a self-loathing creature. And then we get to see, an episode or so later, we get to see Homelander tell him, cover those up, they're disgusting.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of other things I want to talk about with the Deep, that at least one of which I have talked to you about ahead of time. Got to mention it. Throughout season 1, and then we see it also in, I guess it's maybe it's the latest episode or the third episode. For someone who's, basically a riff on Aquaman, which means he not just can talk to sea life, but he actually cares about them and worries about them and tries to. It's not safe to be a sea creature around the deep, because it becomes one of those. You should just incorporate a bunch of drinking games with the boys, and one of them should be, hey, some form of sea life gets killed, horribly.
Yep.
And it's somehow due to the deep, whatever. You get the lobster who gets knifed in the store. You get the whole thing with the dolphin.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, the fact he's clearly talking about having sex with the dolphin later is wow. And and then later on, a fucking whale.
Oh my god, the whale thing was so great, though. Oh my god. Like on every bit, the boat going into the whale, the conversation that takes place inside the whale, the mourning that he has for the whale. There's nothing about that exploded whale that is not just. It's great.
It's pretty. But the thing I wanted to get to, which is what happened in the latest episode. If you're watching the latest episode, which would be, is it Nothing Like It in the World? Yeah. There seemed to be this framing device throughout the episode. And then for a while, you may be wondering what's going on here. And first, because the beginning of the episode is then sprinkled throughout the first, 2/3 of it, whatever. It looks like it's like women like auditioning for like one of those old video dating services or something.
Right.
Like talking about, their dating experiences, whatever. And which is and one can say it's reminiscent of any number of things. You can say, oh, it reminds me of When Harry Met Sally, or it reminds me of Woody Allen movie, whatever. And they're all things like that. They're everything riffs on each other, whatever. We eventually, though, realize or discover that all these women are actually being, I don't know if auditioned is the right word, but they're being questioned or interviewed, because the Church of the Collective is trying to find a wife for the Deep to help improve his image. And that is such a nicely wicked swipe at Scientology.
Yes.
Because as anyone who's paid any attention to things with Scientology over the last few decades, and maybe you've watched certain documentaries or read certain books or whatever, or maybe you just know it through just intuition or osmosis, it's been largely, we'll just say rumored. We'll be nice about it. Let's just say rumored that one of the things that Scientology would do with certain celebrities to help them out with certain situations is, okay, we'll get you a wife. We'll put Tom Cruise is the one, obviously the first one that comes to mind, because there were always rumors of Cruise. He might be he might be gay, he might be this, might be that, who knows? John Travolta is another one who also had to combat certain rumors like that. And, I mean, the stuff, I remember I watched this with Tom Cruise, with the Penelope Cruz. Funny coincidence name there. And the fact that they're doing that here. So it's not just, and again, we talked from the very get-go that this show, superheroes are the celebrities of the day. So it makes perfect sense. Absolutely. Yes. And I just thought that's a really sly, dig, and but it works. It makes so much sense here. And of course, he wants the last one, who's basically going to be, the more, what's the word? Submissive, almost like a submissive whore to him, so to speak, as opposed to
Right.
one of the earlier ones. Plus, I'm also looking at that actress like, oh, she's from both Friends and Breaking Bad. Anyway, I just really thought that was a very kind of.
I think that he should have picked the one with the Ed Sheeran tattoo. Because she too has something hideous she has to hide.
Look at you. That's true. Yeah. Plus, brunettes. Anyway, one of the podcasts would be like, wait, what? What about brunettes? Topic for another podcast. So I'm just sifting through the episodes here. So we kind of talked about the first one, the second one. Oh, that's what the whole thing where the boys have made the deal to catch the super terrorist or super villain who turns out to be Kamiko's brother Kenji. And okay, now he's one of the guys who got. I know he went through some bad stuff. Boo. But unlike, say, Gecko, who, oh boy, I can cut off a limb, and grow it back. Whatever.
Right.
He's got some major, massive telekinetic powers. He's like a seriously super powered soup, I guess. Trying to think let's just go through all that then, because it really kind of informs us more about Kamiko, and that's what eventually leads to the whole, Stormfront murdering him. But we were talking about early on with the collateral damage, and it's very clear as, that building is being blown apart as she's chasing him up the stairs. And I remember thinking at the moment, like, wait, aren't all those people going to die? And that does become part of the plot, part of the storyline, that all these people died, and they can just blame, and they're going to actually blame it on this guy, the quote unquote super terrorist. And the murder scene, what you were saying about Homelander, I think we see is true for her.
Oh, absolutely.
I think he's just purely callous about it. She takes joy in it.
Yeah. Oh, she definitely does. Yes.
I mean, what is it? She says she wants him to open his eyes because she likes to see the light go out in their eyes before she does it. And before the revelation we get in the next episode, I mean, the fact that I think she refers to him as a yellow bastard or something.
Yep.
So we're already like, oh, by the way, she's racist.
Well, and it's funny that, I mean, part of what is amusing, I guess, if that's the right word, is that everything that we see her in up until this point, until this actual point, we really like her. She stands up against Homelander. She's got that like girl power. She's witty. She's spunky. She's fun to watch because she just dishes out the shit right back at them. But then you go, oh, now we're in this situation and we kind of feel for this kid, and oh shit, she's a racist. We don't like her. You know what I mean? Like, we want to make sure that our viewers are witnessing her as actual evil.
Right. And also, and compared to what I was talking about earlier with Homelander, much better liar.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Because she's what you were saying. To the outside world, she's all about authenticity.
Yep.
And just being whatever, and not the honesty the way Starlight is. It's just more about basically exposing everything. Even she's working for Vought, and meanwhile she's saying all the shit about them.
Well, and she's so her character has that authenticity down so well that even as a viewer of this show, this we want to like her.
Right. But what's amazing about this episode is because everything you just said is absolutely true. And in this moment, and when we get to the end of this episode,
yep,
when you realize she's made two very different characters both despise her.
Yep.
Homelander and Kamiko.
Yep.
Very different, but they're both glaring at her.
Yes.
and then the next episode, well, they both. It's a fascinating thing because before this, I would never imagine it would be a character that those two would want killed more than anyone else. It puts us in a really weird position because, like you were saying before that, oh my God, she's taking the wind out of this guy's sail. No, forget wind out of the sail. It's not even the right phrase. She's cutting Homelander down to size and making whatever. But once this has happened, it puts us in a bizarre situation of, again, it's not like we could ever, quote unquote, root for Homelander. Because,
Right.
horrible sociopath, we're not going to forget any of that.
No.
But at this point, you kind of want him to do something to her. It's really weird. I didn't think, especially when we see the revelation about her in the latest episode, where we can just go there now, where
Right.
it turns out she has been around for a lot longer than anyone realizes, and I'm waiting for that explanation, and there could be any number of them. But she had been this character, soup named Liberty back in the 70s, and and when they go on that little mini adventure with Mother's Milk, Huey, and Annie, and they meet that woman who basically witnessed her father being murdered. It's amazing that they did this. I mean, obviously these incidents have been going on off and on for years, unfortunately, but this year more so than any other year, what's been going on with the civil unrest and racial, social justice, however you want to refer to it, with unarmed or in many cases just out and out innocent black men being murdered. Especially, when their cars have been pulled over or on the road, whatever. And we see that here with the supposed superhero Liberty, and what we hear her say and do. So she might as well be, some hayseed sheriff looking to string somebody up or something. It's kind of devastating, and it's eerily prescient.
Yes, it's so great to see these people that are powerful. They're in a place of power. They represent law and order and right and wrong and justice and liberty. And to see that abuse, what's so great with this show is when they are tapping into this reality that is an actual problem for hundreds of years, they are not walking gently around it. I mean, they are just it's point blank.
Yeah.
These are the bad guys, period.
Right. There are plenty of things that are and can be nuanced throughout the show. But there are certain things that they're not going to make any bones about. They're going to be very clear about, and that's what they're doing with this character. And I love the fact that the first, as we've been saying, the first couple episodes you get to meet her, and you're like, oh, and then when the truth is pulled back, and they didn't wait till like a late season reveal for this either. We're still at the midpoint of the season when we're learning all this, and we go from to oh,
yep,
and it's what I really enjoy about that. It kind of reflects, different things that have happened. I'm actually not referring to, what's going on in this country this year, but just overall over the history of just this country or people.
Absolutely.
It's disillusionment. It's feet of that's the phrase, heroes having feet of clay, and we discover that, oh God, and it's almost like you don't want to know. You don't want to find out that whether it be a politician or a sports figure or an actor or whoever it is, you don't want to find out that, oh, hey, guess what? They turned out to be kind of really racist. Or they turned out to actually, he beat his wife, or she did this or that kind of thing. And that's kind of what we get with Stormfront here. It's like, oh, we really like it. And they're like, oh.
Yeah. Oh, this is what she really is.
We thought we see her initially as a possible solution to a problem, and you realize, no, she's just another problem, maybe even possibly a bigger problem. We don't know. I mean, Homelander still is. from what I can see, actually, we don't know. I was going to say Homelander would be, because he's, AKA Superman, he would be the most powerful one. But we don't know enough about her because of the whole Liberty in the back in the 70s thing. So there's more to her.
Clearly she has maybe not an immortality, but it's something that's...
There's something more going on there. She's not
right.
She's not just someone with, lightning-like abilities, a la, like Storm from the X-Men or something like that. Although I guess she can't control the weather because she doesn't do anything else but, lightning correctly. But that's such a common.
Hey, she's got a pretty damn good meme game.
Yeah. Oh my God! Did you see they actually used the was it
the jealous girlfriend
yes,
meme?
The good jealous girlfriend meme.
I was like, yes. There's nothing that meme can't do.
I couldn't stop laughing. They didn't use the one with the screaming woman and the cat one though, did they? Because that's the only other one. That's the only other one that would have made me laugh more if I had seen that. I was like, oh man, I just love the show. Yeah. So basically, what we just spent 20 minutes talking about was really Stormfront bad. They better use
very bad, very, very bad.
And they better use the Billy Joel song. So I had to go there. And anyway, probably flipping through the episodes, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything in the previous episode. Oh, flipping back to the second one of the season that we've gotten so far. And it's also getting back to Annie, just not being what she used to be. When A-Train wakes up from the coma, and because that's like, because I think we all knew. I'm assuming we did. When he's acting like everything's fine, it's like, no. There's no amnesia. That's bullshit. Just wait for it. He's gonna say something. He totally there's no reason he would have forgotten anything. I'm sure he remembers everything. And of course, we do get that reveal. But I love that when he confronts her, and that's when she's already gotten the compound V and everything. So he really has the means to blow her up. No pun intended for what he did to Huey's other girlfriend. But basically, when she kind of goes tit for tat with him, it's like, yeah, you rat me out, then I'm gonna rat you out for murdering Popclaw, whatever.
Yep.
And which would also mean all the stuff that he's been hiding and keeping, on the sly, whatever. So I just like that. Oh, she's still doing it. Not just what she had to do with Gecko, which was kind of messed up. It was, but because he's kind of a sad lame-o, and she kind of is going to screw him over by she threatens to blackmail him with what he's been doing to make a few extra bucks. But, so I didn't love that as much for her, but I felt bad that she was now this is the kind of stuff she has to do. Now she's become that which she probably despises to a certain degree, but I had to love her doing it to A-Train because I think we're kind of geared up to hate him from the get-go.
Yes. Yep.
And even when there are things, which, therefore, you can have a moment with he has late in season 1 when he's in the store and it gets into the whole, the security guard sees a black man and therefore he's going to follow him around the store and whatever. And you almost want to, root for the A-Train character there because he's totally right about what's going on, except it's still A-Train. And right. He's a horrible, you're a horrible person. We've seen that time and time again. You are a horrible person.
And A-Train's a coward.
Oh my God, he's a total coward. For me, I've found him to be even though one can say it could be the Deep because of what he did to Starlight, obviously. But for me, I always thought A-Train was the next worst person on that team that we've seen so far. I almost hope we don't get a backstory for him, but I would love to know the story. I'm waiting to see if we ever get any story behind Black Noir.
That's who I'm really curious about too. And it's funny because he's given so many, he's not talking, but he's given some of the best comedic moments.
Yes. It's clear that no one knows. Homelander, there's even a reference with him. He makes a reference to him. He doesn't even know what the deal is with Blackmore. I think he even makes a reference to that he might be black.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah. He's I'm assuming. Yeah, he's I don't know, there's some great moments with him where he can be obviously very menacing.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Oh,
but yeah, I'm looking forward to more of him. I want to see
I,
see more of that.
you know, and you got to love the fact that, again, for me, it's the guy who's at the closest parallel to Batman on the team.
Yes.
And, who technically, which is funny because, Batman is always known as the one character, or he's actually more than one, but he's certainly the one major character who does not have superpowers. And Black Noir, basically, from what I can see, he just has heightened physical abilities.
Yeah.
He's he's extremely athletic or strong. Maybe he has some form of invulnerability. I haven't seen him fight enough to know, other than when he fought with Kamiko and stuff, and a couple other times. But yeah, it's one of those things. Like, there's part of me that likes the idea that we'll never. I almost don't want to be told anything, and we probably won't. But it's kind of like, which character are we going to hear a word from first, Kamiko or Black Noir? And because they've already had, like, in the last 2 episodes, I kept thinking, oh, she's going to say something now. And she didn't. I swear I thought she was going to say, because they made it clear, no, she can speak. She just hasn't spoken since what happened with the Shining Light terrorist, with her parents being killed and everything else. She hasn't spoken since, and that's why she and her brother developed their version of sign language with each other.
Right.
But I thought, especially after Stormfront killed her brother, that we would hear her speak. So, I mean, maybe that would have been the obvious cliche thing to do, so I'll give them credit for not doing that, I guess. But I kind of wonder if she's ever going to speak or not,
I bet if she does speak, it's going to be a power.
Interesting. Like a black canary kind of a thing.
Yes.
That's one they haven't done yet. Okay, let's see where we can go here. Oh, we covered a whole lot of stuff. Oh, covered that too. We're in episode 11. Starlight leaking the Compound V story to the media. And I mean, I like the idea that they've kind of found their way around that, so it turned out to be, it's not really as big an expose as they all thought it was going to be.
Right.
They're out there, Isn't that one of the comic moments? Like, don't we see, like, Black Noir kind of crying in a hallway or something? like racking with sobs or something. Which made, because I kept, I'll tell you right now, I thought the reveal of Black Noir was going to be that, guess what, aliens do exist and he's one.
Oh my gosh.
Because then it would have, like, subverted my whole, he's Batman and the other guy's Martian. It's like, oh my God, he was actually Martian Manhunter all the time. But, but if he's crying, then he can't be an alien. I'm just saying. So you had that happen. And I knew and I also, but, I'm sorry. What do you want to say?
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think we all thought coming that the kid, Ryan, was going to use his powers when, the Homelander was, like, basically threatening or doing something as far as his mother was concerned.
Yeah, we were going to have to push that kid to get pretty damn irritated.
Yeah, and I knew it was going to be something like that. I kind of figured, it has to be defending his mom. I'm just waiting for that. I did love him, like, pushing him off the roof.
Oh my God, right? And it's like the whole, like, force him to swim abuse, but at a whole new level.
Yes, it's exactly what it is. It's exactly what I was thinking, and how that would not have worked for me.
Right. Nope, not at all.
All right, just flipping through this, and Edgar tying the late Stillwell to the Compound V fiasco. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so we're up to the last episode. Okay, we already talked about Butcher and Becca in that episode, and how, we can talk about it a bit more, but again, I thought that was Carl Urban and his character. I felt genuine sorrow for him and frustration about the situation. Even though I hate to say it, I don't hate to say it, I kind of knew that's where it had to go.
Right.
And it wasn't just because, if you have sex, bad things are going to happen the next day, because that's what happened to all of them. Huey and Andy, they have sex, and guess what? We got to break up.
Yep. This is going to go nowhere good, guys.
But I kept thinking, she's gonna have to say it. There's no way he's gonna accept that kid.
Yeah, and I think that when he calls the kid a super freak, he's pretty much put the nail in that coffin.
Oh yeah. There's one guy who's not able to restrain things, I guess. But there's just no way. So the only reason I'm not talking that much about it, because I think we all kind of saw that coming. And
Yes.
it's just now, it's a matter of where do you go from here? Because she's never going to leave with him then. So so what is this? Is he just going to be fueled because of what happened to her? Since, you know what I mean? It's just,
where's he going to go? Where's his push coming from now?
Is he going to just sink into a deep depression? Is Black Noir going to show up because he knows he's there and kill? Well,
there's a good chance that we have somebody like Stormfront who finds out that Homelander has a kid.
That is true. They can go that route. It's interesting. There's definitely, since now we're at the point, once she said, no, you got to leave, whatever, it's like, okay, now I don't really know where we're going to go with this. So I'm kind of curious about it. I've been curious all along, but now I'm not sure. I mean, I have some ideas, but because I know there needs to be future seasons of this show. We already know there's a season 3 and forward. If I knew like this is like the final season, I would definitely have a different idea of where they're going to go.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I do know for sure, and that's that A-Train loves fat kids. Oh my God, I almost died. That was so funny. I love fat kids.
Wait, is this the episode where he's basically told he's being kicked out? Is it in this episode?
Yes.
Okay,
yep.
That's right. Only because I've seen a lot. I couldn't remember if it was this one or the one before because I didn't make a specific note about it. Yeah, this is the episode where Homelander is doing a lot of this to try to he's trying to assert his control. Oh, and this is where we got to talk about control. Yeah, that's right. Because Homelander is like taking control. He's okay. A-Train is out. He outs Queen Maeve on the TV series on the interview.
Yeah,
which
man.
Is like, whoa. I kind of believe him though. I don't think at this point he cares that she's with this other woman.
I don't think that he actually cares. Again, it's that being lied to.
Yes, that's what it keeps coming down to for him. And because it's just something that it's been his bugaboo from day one, because again, it goes back to his own origins and what he didn't know. And then you tie it to the stuff with Becca and Ryan and him not knowing that he actually had a kid and all this stuff. So yeah, absolutely. There's something, but the one, come on, let's just flip right to it. Oh, you know what? Did I mention the OCD? Okay. Mother Milk and the OCD.
Yes.
Okay, I very much appreciated them doing. I got a kick out of it. Thought it was interesting, and a little thing about his character, whatever. But I just watched season 1. I didn't really see any indication of that in season 1. I just feel like I would have caught something. I mean, maybe I missed it.
I didn't catch anything, and I mean, yeah, again, maybe you missed it. I didn't catch anything, but I will tell you that I have a very, very close person to me that has OCD, and I'm pretty sure I would have spotted it.
Yeah.
It is something that, for years and years, it has been a part, in my life that I have seen it on a very regular basis. So I don't think that they really did a whole lot with that until the second season.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, I'm not really calling them out on it, so to speak, because basically it's just in how you set up the scenes. If there's not a situation in the scene that actually calls for it to make its presence known, so to speak, then you're fine. But when they point out, one of the things that Annie picked up on and she tells Huey is what he's doing with the steering wheel. And I was like, was he never driving before? Was Frenchie always the one driving, maybe? Or maybe it was Butcher sometimes. So I was actually, in my mind, I was trying to rewind, trying to think, were there any instances where we would have seen that and we just didn't? I was like, well, I'm not sure. So that's why I can't really call them out on it, but I feel it's odd that it didn't come up before. It's also it's interesting to me to have someone with a literal control issue, which is what OCD is all about. And that's pretty much one of the most, if not the most common, fatal flaw of characters in fictional series is the need or lack of control. And each character has that to some degree. Homelander absolutely does. Butcher absolutely does. Huey does. And it all manifests in different ways. And it's just funny that you actually have a character who has OCD. And this is his way of at least controlling these, even if it's just, how this sugar is going to be put into his coffee or his ritual of how he taps the steering wheel or whatever. It's his control of his own little universe around him, even if he can't do anything about what's going on beyond,
he's up against a world that has literal, people with superpowers. It is really hard to feel like you have any real control in all of that.
Yeah, so it makes perfect sense. And the final thing, and it's the end of the episode, and it's a podcast that turned out to be just as long as the ones on the Doom Patrol and Umbrella Academy. So, thank you, David. It's all your fault. The final thing, the stuff with Homelander and Doppelganger.
Oh my God, that's so weird.
Okay. I'm pretty sure we all knew that was Doppelganger from the word go. So it was the only explanation.
Well, I thought for the first 50 seconds we were looking, less than 50 seconds, I thought we were looking at a memory, but then it became very clear we weren't.
Right. So I at least, I knew that was Doppelganger from the get-go. So already I was always like, oh, this just got instantly creepy because, I believe I don't have to say why.
Right, right.
And then when he takes it to that nth degree at the end where he becomes him.
That was so that I didn't know which way they were going to go with it. I was all for it because I knew they could really they could take that into some weird places, but I still kind of loved it because that whole what is this guy going to do when he's facing himself? Of course he's gonna fucking kill himself and say, I'm stronger than you.
Right. And that, I feel my memory's at a loss at the moment. That's riffing on something else I cannot put my finger on. And maybe between now and the next podcast, I'll either remember it myself or I'll look into it. But that's a thing. Where basically essentially would be like being in love with and literally having sex with yourself. Like a twin situation, whatever. And I feel that's been delved into. There's a story or something somewhere. I cannot, my memory is not working. I can't think of what it is, or maybe whatever. But the whole thing when he gets on his knees and basically says, I'm you, so who wouldn't be gay? But I was just like, okay, first of all, I know he's going to kill him. I know. I'm just wondering how he's going to do it. There's so many ways I actually thought the thing I kind of made the weird reference to before was, why Superman shouldn't have sex with anybody. I thought maybe they were going to go that route here. Although they really would have added, that might be something they couldn't have shown on screen. It would have had to be just, below screen, so to speak. Instead they're like, oh, you went with the old head squeeze, crack, whatever. Not sure why he didn't change back into himself while he was laying there on the floor, though it wouldn't have worked for the moment, but I think he would have changed back.
That's what I thought too. How did he not turn back to his original form? This is a tried and true method. You kill somebody with powers and they go back to their original form.
Right. Very strange. And it also, and I don't know if anybody else noticed this or people were paying attention. It's probably not significant, really. But this would be the 12th episode of the series, right? Unless I'm mistaken, all the previous 11 end with some piece of music. It may be a recurring song that was used earlier in the episode. It may be a totally different song. It may be something that's more orchestral.
One that runs through credits.
Whatever. Right. However, if you're watching this episode, you notice there's no music. And but you might just assume, oh, they didn't have any music. But because it struck me as odd, I turned up the sound. We're still in that room. Because if you listen, it's not silent. You're hearing the occasional, like, crackly sound, like the crackle of a fire in a fireplace. So, and I was like, what's interesting about that, and it made me, it was just a curious choice on their part, is that feels like the kind of thing you do after a truly significant death.
Yes.
You know? If say you ended, you know, like the end of like the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones, that would make sense because it's like, wow, I can't hear anything right now, you know, and maybe a little bit of rain to cast me, maybe, but you know what I mean. This is like, and I'm like, okay, but by doing that, I feel that they were trying to, and there's my cat.
I hear him.
Yeah, and he's like, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes, jerk. He's like, give me some snacks that you won't eat anyway. All right, dude, shut. Oh, God damn it! Wow, it's like 3 in a row, and probably more.
It's like I must eat now. There's no option. Food now.
But I just, the thing I want to say at the very end here is, like, I felt like they were trying to tell us something, like they feel like they're attaching more importance. And maybe it's not, obviously it's nothing to do with doppelganger. Who cares about that guy? It's more about what this represents.
Yes.
And what this might portend, if that's even a word, or whatever, for the rest of the series, the rest of the season, the next episode, whatever. Because what we were just saying about control, this is Homelander taking control.
Right. And now he can, you know, if he's killing off that part of him that cares about what people think of him, the part of him that needs to be adored,
right?
Who is this new person going to be?
But once you move past that, you start wondering, at what point, why doesn't he try to kill her? Because it doesn't seem like it would be that big a deal to him to just
right.
Whatever. I mean, he can cover, I'm sure he can find a way to cover it up, or just have her just whatever. You know, that's why I'm very curious of, like, what if we already know there's way more to her, and I wonder if she would actually be a much bigger.
I definitely think that we're going to find some genetic connections.
Yeah, there's something. There's going to be some more there, but I'm wondering if she's also whether he wouldn't be able to take her out as easily as I think, because the way they've established him, he just flicks on the heat vision and slices people like no
yeah.
And even though she does kind of talk him down when he has that little moment there, I'm wondering, because again, the whole 1970s thing, whatever. There's certainly something a lot more to her. But also,
see, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is a mom connection, but but what I noticed is when she was saying that to him, it's like she almost was taking the real life place of Madeline.
Yeah. And wouldn't that be interesting if it turned out that she genetically was his mother or something like that? I could totally see that now. Just based on this establishing her being around in the 70s.
70s, yep.
Yeah, and why she might have disappeared also. 79.
See, and then that could connect her to wanting to go find her grandkid. Probably not because she wants to love her grandkid. Probably nothing good, but nonetheless.
But it would kind of work out time-wise also. Because we figure Homelander's character is supposed to probably be late 30s, 40. Around that. That's very interesting. And again, if anyone listening, if this has been explored and done in the I have no idea. I did type anything differences between season 1 and season 2 in comics, and I couldn't find anything yet because maybe they're waiting for the season to be over. I just happened to come across a Stormfront thing about the fact that it was a guy in the comics. So
right.
Well, I can say that at least, but I don't
so,
know.
yeah, I mean, clearly that's not the storyline that they would be necessarily running, not tit for tat, but, you know.
Yeah. Oh, well, thankfully. They're going in a much more interesting direction, clearly. Okay. I cannot... Oh, Lordy. It's once again my fault. I'm going to try to wrap things up here.
Hey, and you know what? On the future ones, we're not going to be in for a 3-hour drive. We have caught up with an entire season and a half.
I know, it's my fault. All right, hopefully it was. It sounded good in my ears. Hopefully it'll be sounding good in your guys' ears. And if this was good in your ears, I got something that's good for your eyes too. It's checking out our Facebook page. It's the Serious TV Drama Podcast page. Like the page and join the conversation about shows like The Boys, Umbrella Academy, and Doom Patrol, Better Call Saul. Pretty much, you can talk about any shows there. Oh, by the way, I don't know if she's going to listen to this podcast, so I'm just going to say it here. If she doesn't hear it, I don't, fine. If she does hear it, I don't care. I didn't have the nerve to actually out and out say it on the Facebook page, so I'm going to say it on the podcast. Yeah, that's the kind of coward I am. I'm going to wait 2 hours and 45 minutes before I say this. That trailer for the Rebecca movie on Netflix looks awful. It looks awful. Stop defending it because it's a Daphne du Maurier novel. Yes, it's a great novel. It doesn't look like a great adaptation. There's no chemistry between those two. There's nothing interesting looking about this series. It looks like a pale, lousy Lifetime version of a great story. You know what? Forget there was a Hitchcock movie. I'll put that aside because you know what? Rebecca's not even in my top 10 Hitchcock movies. I don't even think it's in my top 15 Hitchcock movies. This looks like bleh. Lily James, she was like the worst thing in Yesterday. She was not interesting in Downton Abbey. Don't care about her. Armie Hammer, I have my issues because he was considered for a script. Anyway, there's nothing good. You know what? There is an article. I think it's, oh God, I forget which website. Happy Club or AV Club or one of those freaking things. They blasted it. And I actually sent the writer an email. I said, dude, you and me both. It looks like shit. Anyway, back to wrapping it up. So, you can also find us in places like, you go to Apple Podcasts, which used to be iTunes, but now certainly it isn't. You can subscribe to our feed there as well as rate and review us. Hopefully it'll be a better review than I gave that awful piece of shit trailer for Rebecca. And then
and I mean, if it's not, at least we'll have more comments.
Yeah, there you go. You can also find us you can go right to our host page or whatever the heck it's called because I'm so stupid I don't know how to phrase things, but you can find all 200 and oh God, which number podcast is this? Is this 269? I think this is 269. So all 269 of our episodes can be found at stvdpodcast.podbean.com. .com. That's where you can find all those. Although it's weird, some of them say forbidden on them and you can't play them, but then you fiddle around with them, then they do play. I have no idea. Whatever. It's weird.
You have to be a part of the secret club.
Yeah, apparently I'm not. Also, finally, you can follow us on Twitter. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast. That's STVD as in Serious TV Drama Podcast. I actually accidentally used that account for a tweet I sent out in the last day or two. It was meant to be from my personal account. So someone's going to say, why is the Serious TV Drama Podcast commenting on this, on this thing on the MLB network? It wasn't meant to do that. I was getting angry. Oh, you're not going to like this because someone was making a comment about Albert Pujols and they said, the greatest first baseman of all time. And
I don't know who you're talking about. I don't acknowledge this Albert Pujols.
Okay. Well, the point was, I was like, no. It's like, yeah, I'm sorry. And unless you go back in history and erase the existence of someone named Lou Gehrig, no one else gets to be the greatest first baseman of all time. And here's why. And you give me these three, cumulative stats that Pujols has over Gehrig. It's like, yeah, because he has 2,800 more at bats. That's why he has 12 more RBIs. Look at that. It took you 2,800 more at-bats to get 12 more RBIs. Get out of here.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yep.
So,
yeah, I'm not going to disagree with any of it. Here.
Yeah, plus, lifetime batting average of 340. Anyway, so why do I extend these things? So, and STV podcast, anything else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Type in Serious TV Drama Podcast or STV Podcast into Google and you'll find us 8,000 other places. Okay, so next week we will be back for covering just one episode. Just one. Just one. So it'll only be 2 up now. We will be covering the next episode of The Boys. And guess what? Because we're only going to be covering one episode of a television series, just like we did in olden times. I will probably at that point, at the end of that podcast, give you guys some information about the series of podcasts that are going to be happening from late October on this feed that I've tentatively titled The Greatest TV Drama Episodes of All Time. And
Time.
I'll tell you guys about it next week. That way you guys can all bitch and whine about it from at the end of the year. I don't care. Sorry, NYPD Blue. Anyway, that's it. So, Jamie, thank you for joining me. I totally jinxed this by saying there's no way this podcast could be as long as the previous 2. It turned out to be longer.
Yay! We get the meme. You better make it happen.
Yeah, I apologize. I know that I had so much to tell. I couldn't stop myself.
Hey, everyone's caught up now. We're all good. We're on the same page.
Yeah. Next week it's going to be even Steven, 50-50. Oh, well, 55, 60, well, never mind. Okay. Probably turn. Last thing I wanted to say. The scene when the guy is talking about the possible movie, the Dawn of the Seven, whatever, and he's doing the whole thing with the storyboards, and when he mentions and then the big Hans Zimmer theme, boom, which is like that, boom, boom. Well, guess what? That's actually. I've come up with a piece of music which will tentatively be the STVD podcast opening theme from now on, or until we change it, or at least I'm going to use it for all the boys podcast. So what I blew out your eardrums with at the beginning of the
Watch
podcast,
mic levels.
It's only, but you know what? It's only 28 seconds long. So certain people will complain about the length of opening theme music. This one should be fine for you. They're not going to.
Pick your hat up off the floor.
He's not going to listen to this podcast either. All right, not after they see it's 3 hours. All right. So on that note, Jamie, thank you for sticking around and being able to stay up till 2 a.m. to do this freaking podcast. Guess I'm not going to that bar tonight. I'll talk to you later. I'll say goodnight and I'll finally let you have the last word.
Hey, as always, thanks for having me. Appreciate you.